Committee will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the second day of our public witness hearings for American Indian and Alaska Native programs. I want to welcome all the distinguished tribal elders and leaders here today and thank our witnesses for appearing before the committee to share their concerns on these important topics. In terms of hearing logistics, I will call each panel of witnesses to the table, one panel at a time. If I can turn my page. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present testimony. The full written testimony will be included in the record, and believe it or not, we actually do read those, so they will be in the record. So please don't feel pressured to cover everything in 5 minutes. We will be using a timer to track progress of each witness. When the light turns yellow, the witness will have 1 minute remaining to conclude their remarks. When the light turns red, I will ask the witness to stop in order to remain on schedule and respect everybody's time. We'll hear from every witness on each panel before members will be provided an opportunity to ask questions. Because we have a full day ahead, I request that we try to keep things moving so that we can stay on schedule and respect each other's time. And we will have, because there are hearings in committees all over right now in the Appropriations Committee, we will have members coming in and leaving and coming in and leaving and all that kind of stuff. So I think Betty has to go to a hearing that in 15 minutes. So I also want to note that the committee rules prohibit the use of outside cameras and audio equipment during these hearings. The hearings can be viewed in its entirety on the committee's website, and an official hearing transcript will be available at gpo.gov. Now I'm happy to yield to my ranking member for any remarks that she may wish to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding these hearings. Thank you to everybody who came yesterday and all of the witnesses who will be with us today, for traveling a long distance and for taking your time to be with all of us. I just want to say briefly what I said yesterday. The Trump administration has only been in office a few short weeks, yet they have created chaos and disruption into indigenous communities, created anxiety and uncertainty for tribal members over their employment status, the continuation of critical health care and educational services, and in some cases even challenged their citizenship. I hope our witnesses today will use this hearing as an opportunity to sound the alarm on the devastating impacts of this administration's policies. I hope you will shine much-needed spotlight on the damaging impacts that the freeze on federal funding, the termination of probationary employees, and the federal hiring freeze are already had and will have on the lives and livelihoods of tribal nations and indigenous communities across the country. Yesterday's hearings provided a lot of important information, and I look forward to hearing about what is happening in your communities, the needs and challenges facing Indian country, and your priorities for the programs in the Interior Bill. Our discussions will allow your voices to be heard and will help inform us as we finish the fiscal year 2025 funding bill and then begin developing the fiscal year 2026 appropriations bill. Thanks again for being here with us today, and I yield back to Chairman Simpson.
Thank you. Let's begin with our first panel. Charles, Myron, Harry, come on down. Yeah. You're all governors. All right. I use the first names because I can usually pronounce those right. And the others, I'm not too good at pronunciation. So anyway, if I call you by your first name, that's okay. So we'll start. Harry, you're first.
Okay, that was great, Josh. Hopa, second the side watching the Shranai, Shranai, got in a coopish tire. Kaya you Junomatana. What do him, Ashua, what's it Sanuk says, Shraska Washi says. Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the committee. I am Governor Harry A. Antonio, Jr. of the Pueblo of Laguna, a federally recognized Indian tribe 45 miles west of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We call ourselves Goek Hanu, which translates to lake people. The Hanu have lived on our lands going back centuries, long before European contact. Thankfully, we did not suffer displacement like other Native people. I am here with our elected leadership to ask for funding so that Goek Hanu will continue to thrive on our homeland for many more generations. We make our requests not just because Goek Hanu need it. We make them on the basis of the federal government's trust responsibility. Supreme Court trust doctrine states that if the United States has authority over Indian tribes, it also has the obligation to protect Indian people and their resources. There have been times that the federal government neglected its trust obligations. As a consequence, Goek Hanu lost vital resources and suffered bad health. We also make these requests on the basis of Goek Hanu's status as United States citizens established by Congress over 100 years ago. Goek Hanu have proudly served in every U.S. conflict since World War I. The patriotism and sacrifice of Goek Hanu as U.S. citizens justify these requests. Finally, we make these requests to support Laguna's efforts at self-determination and self-sufficiency. With the support of Congress and the President, we can make that goal a reality. Ironically, a shrinking water supply threatens the existence of Goek Hanu, the lake people. For centuries, our ancestors built and maintained massive rock and earth dams to store thousands of acre-feet of water for our use. Over the last 100 years, stream flow in our main source of water dropped to 1/10 of its historic flow, largely as a result of over-appropriation upstream by junior water diverters for uses including uranium mining and energy production. The federal trustees' failure to protect our legal right to life-sustaining water imperils our culture and our way of life and our very existence. In 2022, after decades of litigation to recognize and protect Laguna's time immemorial water rights, the parties reached a settlement agreement. Congress can remedy the neglect of trust responsibility by providing money to develop reliable sources of wet water through enactment and funding of the Rio San Jose and Rio Jemez Water Settlements Act. This fund-based Water Settlement Act enables Goek Hanu to develop alternative sources of water supply to sustain our people without shutting off junior upstream water users. Passage and funding of the Water Settlements Act should be a high priority, because the cost of wet water in our arid landscape will only increase over time if this legislation is not passed and funded now. Another matter of high importance is the reauthorization of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA. RECA authorization addresses the cancers and other diseases suffered by Americans who worked in the U.S. uranium industry or who innocently lived downwind from U.S. nuclear testing sites. As passed last year by the Senate with strong bipartisan support, the reauthorization of RECA would extend funding for 6 years, expand coverage to uranium workers exposed after 1971, and include downwinders. The Pueblo of Laguna was the site of the world's largest open-pit uranium mine. Laguna people helped defend the United States by extracting the raw material to make U.S. nuclear weapons, but our people paid for their patriotism with their health. As a consequence of the Cold War, Laguna and other uranium industry workers and innocent bystanders forfeited their health. Treating these illnesses, taxes are already strained Indian Health Service resources. Congress cannot ignore or forget these unsung patriots for the sake of squeezing the budget. We submitted written viewpoints regarding several other programs that require sustained federal funding. We ask you to remember that federal funds appropriated for the benefit of Indian tribes are not gifts or diversity programs. Rather, they are the United States fulfilling its trust obligation, honoring American citizens and patriots, and promoting self-determination and self-sufficiency tribally. Thank you for allowing me to testify today on these topics. I hope that as you exercise your congressional responsibilities, you remember to help better future unfold for the Goek Hanu, other tribal peoples, and all Americans. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Harry. Myron, you're next.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Simpson, Ranking Member Reed, and Subcommittee members. Oops. Yes, can you hear me now? Yep. We'd like to take this opportunity to share our funding priorities for the fiscal year 26 federal budget. My name is Myron Armijo, and I am the governor of Santa Ana Pueblo in New Mexico. We're a community of about 900 plus and growing. My name is Hawitrana, and in my native language, Karis. I'm from the Eagle Clan, and so we're here today to talk about our issues here. Today, I'm going to say, Mr. Chairman, we are in unprecedented times. I ask that your committee and other committees, monitor this administration's actions, given the brevity of the extent of executive orders, pauses in grant funding, firing of government employees, etc. Okay. First, I would like to emphasize that recent federal actions a great potential for causing long-lasting harm across Indian country. The United States holds unique trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations that are fulfilled in part by the direct delivery of tribal programs, services, and provision of federal funding to tribal governments and tribal organizations serving tribal nations. Any federal program or funding delivered to tribal nations is provided in furtherance of the United States obligations. However, the effectiveness of the United States towards fulfilling its trust and treaty obligations is fundamentally dependent on federal employees, which help us in Indian country. Federal employees necessary for the functioning of tribal programs and the disbursement of the federal funds to tribal nations are a critical part of fulfilling the obligations of the United States. Terminating federal employees who serve these agencies will devastate the delivery of vital services to Indian country. Today, we are very concerned that termination of nearly 1,000 employees of the Indian Health Service was under consideration. We are grateful that the voice of Indian country was heard, leading to the rescission of these planned terminations. However, the Indian Health Service, which has been woefully underfunded over the many years, should be allocated additional resources instead of facing cuts, because it is a critical agency to not only fulfilling the United States obligations to the tribes, but also providing life-saving services and improving the health and welfare of our tribal citizens. Very important. Santa Ana Pueblo has been in advanced negotiations with the Indian Health Service for the construction of a new Indian health facility on our reservation lands. This is a new facility is not only desperately needed for the health of the community, but for a powerful engine for economic activity and employment. The Pueblo and the surrounding community would be tragically impacted if this project were to be upended due to actions by the federal government. The Pueblo strongly urges the committee to defend Indian program funding and the implementation of such funding by federal employees across the federal government, including the BIA, BIE, and IHS. The Pueblo emphasizes that the federal government should seek to retain and further recruit federal employees handling Indian affairs issues in the fulfillment of the United States trust responsibility and the well-being of its tribal citizens. We understand that the current administration wants to improve the federal government's operations and promote efficiency through reducing a bloated federal bureaucracy and waste and misuse of federal funds. However, the government's efforts to fulfill its trust obligations do not represent a bloated federal bureaucracy. Instead, it is starving from chronic underfunding over the many, many years. And this has taken a toll on tribal communities. Federal agencies serving tribal nations have rarely been fully staffed, which has hindered their effectiveness. Further funding for Indian programs provided by Congress only makes up a tiny fraction of the overall federal budget and has been insufficient to fulfill the federal government's obligations. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in closing, I urge Congress, with all the emphasis that I can muster here today, to uphold its unique trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations through adequate funding, services, and staffing, which honors tribal communities as the original sovereigns and inhabitants of this land. The United States fulfillment of this solemn responsibility is unlike any other function served by the federal government and should not be defeated by a blind push to downsize government, generally in the hopes of promoting efficiencies. Mr. Chairman, we look forward to working with President Trump's administration, and I feel strongly we, the tribes, pueblos, and nations throughout the country, would be a good resource for him. We could help one another. Thank you all for taking these issues seriously, and I welcome any questions you might have. And Mr. Chairman, if I could say one more thing. I'm also the chairman of the 10 Southern Governors in New Mexico, which represents 10 pueblos in the Middle Valley of the Middle Rio Grande Valley. It's their same concerns. I don't speak for them, but they all have the same concerns on what's going on. Yeah. We're just perplexed by the issues that are happening. Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that you'll take our concerns and help us going forward. And as I said, we're glad to work with the President's administration. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Myron. Charles?
Thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree and subcommittee members for the opportunity to share our funding priorities for the fiscal year 2026 federal budget and for your support for many Indian country programs. My name is Charles Riley, and I'm the governor of the Pueblo of Acoma, New Mexico. In my written testimony, I set forth specific recommendations and requests, but at this time, I would like to speak more broadly and welcome any questions. First, the Acoma people are an ancient people. Acoma Sky City has been our Mesa Top home for over 1,000 years, making it the oldest inhabited community in the United States. As represented by the canes we carry given to us by Abraham Lincoln, we share a unique government-to-government relationship with the United States. The Lincoln canes were specifically presented to the every Pueblo governor over 150 years ago to acknowledge our sovereignty over our lands and our people. This cane is a physical embodiment of the recognition of our status and the commitment of the United States to protect and respect our sovereign rights, as well as to support the well-being of our communities and pursuant to federal responsibility. In addition, we also carry canes presented by the Spanish Crown and the Mexican government in acknowledgement of our sovereignty. And like other tribes, we express our appreciation to those members of Congress and agency leaders who have stepped up to ensure that our relationship is respected and our communities insulated from the harmful federal funding freezes, terminations, and similar initiatives. Second, our water settlement was recently reintroduced, and we asked this subcommittee to support full funding for Indian water settlements, which promote economic development and water security for the future. Third, in 2020, President Trump successfully facilitated the returns of numerous ancestral Pueblo human remains and associated funerary objects from Finland. President Trump also played an integral role in pushing the Safeguard Tribal Objects and Patrimony, or STOP Act, across the finish line in Congress. Consistent with those actions of the President, we asked this subcommittee to provide additional funding for the support of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, as well as funding for the implementation of the STOP Act, and additional funds for tribal historic preservation offices. These funds are needed to ensure the protection of our land's most sacred and historic objects and ceremonies. Fourth, we appreciate the acknowledgement that the Indian Health Service requires advanced appropriations, and we call on the subcommittee to support permanent, advanced, and full appropriations of the IHS, as well as an increase in funding for the Special Diabetes Program for Indians to account for inflation. We will also like to take this time to acknowledge and thank Secretary Kennedy for rescinding the IHS layoffs. The Pueblo emphasizes IHS should not be subject to layoffs. For many Pueblo citizens, the IHS is the only accessible healthcare provider and has long been stretched thin due to underfunding and understaffing. We urge this subcommittee to provide the IHS with the funding and security needed to provide for health care Indian country depends on. We also request support for smaller IHS hospitals such as the Acoma Canincito Laguna Indian Health Facility, which provides critical health care services to the Pueblo of Laguna, Acoma, as well as emergency services to the traveling public along the I-40 corridor. Our Pueblo has a rich history of service to our country, including veterans who served in World War I and in each campaign since, including our own Acoma Code Talkers of World War II that were recognized by the United States in 2013. Our veterans rely on both IHS and Veterans Administration. Fifth, we request that this subcommittee provide funding for a comprehensive resource management plan for the BLM Farmington Field Office. The current plan is severely outdated and does not reflect the modern technologies or techniques, and an update is needed to ensure protection of our cultural sites around Chaco Canyon. Finally, we know that the administration and this subcommittee are well aware of the severe law enforcement needs in Indian country. Increased law enforcement for Indian country is imperative to keep our people safe. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for your time. More topics and more detail can be found in my written testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank
I would
you.
also like to invite you all to up to Acoma to come see our villages and our pueblos.
Yeah.
On the ground is something much different than seeing it in pictures.
Absolutely.
Along with Chairman Myron Armijo, Governor Myron Armijo, I sit on as a secretary for Southern Pueblos Council. And
Great. Well, thank you, and thanks for your testimony, and thanks for being here today. Well, first of all, I agree with you on SHPOs. They're very important for the preservation of these things and for the repatriation. Is there a bill that hasn't passed yet or something that needs to get done?
The Stop Act was passed.
That's what I thought.
The funding for it and the regulations have not been finished.
Okay. Yeah, that needs to get done. In fact, I've written letters when we've seen them in the office. I shouldn't say I've written. I've had the staff write them because they write better than I do. About when we see articles in the newspapers about Native American remains that are in some museum in New York or whatever and stuff. Wait a minute, guys. We thought they were Smithsonian at first, but they say no. We're respectful of the law, and so they need to be returned. That's obvious. This is a broader question, though, and I apologize for not being as smart on this as I should be. You're all Pueblo.
Yes.
Different bands,
Yes.
different reservations, right?
Different communities, yes.
Different communities.
Is the water rights settlement that you talked about, is that, first of all, does that need legislation to pass?
I know it's already been,
It's already passed?
yes.
No,
No.
it's being reintroduced.
It's being, okay, and
been
it
sitting
needs,
there for a
it
while.
needs to pass. What is the, assuming it passes, what would be the funding that, where the Appropriations Committee? I'd like to know what we're getting into. And literally, water rights settlements across Indian country are going to be huge.
Yes.
In the years coming up. So does this just affect your reservation, or does it affect all of them?
It affects both Laguna and Acoma.
Acoma Laguna.
Okay,
We're neighbors right beside each other out in New Mexico.
okay,
Acoma is upstream from us, so we're the last one in line, if you will.
yeah. I know how that goes.
Mr. Chairman, there's also the Pueblo of Zuni, who has a water settlement here in D.C., local agreement and legislation. There's also Okeawinge and parties in the northern part of New Mexico. In the Aragon case, their legislation and local agreement is here as well. And so we're looking to your community or your committee here to help support these water settlements. Very important to the state of New Mexico.
Yep.
There's also my Pueblo in the Middle Valley, the Middle Rio Grande Valley. We're just now starting up our negotiations with Cochiti Pueblo, Giwa Pueblo, Santa Ana, San Felipe, Isleta, and Sandia Pueblos. We'll be starting up that negotiation process in the very near future.
Okay.
So these are very important water settlements for
I agree.
the state of New Mexico.
Yeah,
And
they're
across the
agreed-
country for Indian
across the country.
Yes.
I was just talking with Fort Belknap tribes, and they got a huge settlement that it's going to cost us, I think, over a 10-year period, billion.3,
Yes.
something like that. And what I'm trying to get a handle on is, and a lot of these settlements are going to be coming down, as they rightly should. For me, the question is, okay, how are we going to fund them?
Okay.
Because settlement doesn't mean anything if you don't get the money from it, So, and I'm trying to figure out how we can plan on this so that we could actually do a legitimate funding of it once we get them. But there's going to be a lot of them, and it's going to be one of the biggest driver in our interior bill right now is Indian country, Indian health services, Indian education, Indian law enforcement and stuff. And we're not there yet by a long shot, but obviously this is something that we need to do. And we've been working on it in a bipartisan manner. When Shelley was chairman of the committee, she worked with the Republicans on it. Indian country is a bipartisan issue, but that's the biggest part of our budget. And now we're going to get water rights settlements on it, and pretty soon it's going to eat up the rest of the budget unless we can figure out a way to get it funded and that kind of stuff, so that we don't end up cutting the Forest Service to where they don't have any employees, or BLM or any of the other agencies that also get funded on our bill. But our first responsibility, frankly, is we got treaty and trust responsibilities that we have to mandate. So anyway, I appreciate you all being testified. I want to get out there and see this.
Yeah.
Please come on
Please
out.
come
I will
out.
do
Come
that.
visit us as well.
More than welcome.
I will do so.
And you're
Bring your
members
staff.
of your committee. Please come on out.
Yes.
It's as Governor said, it's different. Boots on the ground, you see it,
Yep.
versus looking at it in a book or in a picture.
Absolutely. That always
much
works better.
different.
See it in person. Yep.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Ms. Pingree?
Yeah, and thank you. I'll just echo what the chair said, and I really appreciate his giving some kind of more global thought to these water settlements. You're right. We've heard about others yesterday, and they're obviously just going to continue in the, sort of fight for water out west. Something we don't understand in New England, but, we respect how critical it is out there.
That's why we've always wanted to do a big pipe from the Great Lakes.
Mr. Chairman, I spoke to two ladies from Michigan one time during New Mexico's legislative session. Two ladies walking around west of the Capitol. I said, "Ladies, may I help you? You look lost." And they says, "Oh no, we're looking for the Capitol." I said, "It's right in front of you, right there. Please come in." Yeah, there's a lot of art in there. And I said, "By the way, where are you ladies from?" And they go, "From Michigan." Such a deal I have for you too. And this is what I told them. How about getting some of your water from the Great Lakes to New Mexico? Oh, expletive, no. There you have it.
I know.
Well, we'd be much more charitable if you need our water, but it's just a logistical challenge to get it there. But anyway, I do think it's one of the key responsibilities of this committee going into the future to figure that out. I appreciate many of you have mentioned the concerns you have with making sure that this administration doesn't take the wrong tack on, thinking that tribes are DEI or making cuts. And I thank you all for speaking up, because I think, as you said, some of these cuts are being reversed, but we also have to stay vigilant. There's so many little places that you go to funding at HHS or EPA or other places. And so please continue to keep us informed just so we can help you push back on that. And again, I concur with the chair on NAGPRA. If there are areas we're not doing sufficient funding, I think we've turned the corner on people understanding how critically important that is. But it sounds like there's some legislation that hasn't passed here. Yes, I know that. So the one other thing I wanted to ask you about was the RECA, the radiation. So have there been some funds made available, and then you said it hadn't been reauthorized, so I just want to know where that is. Are people currently getting the assistance that they need for radiation exposure or not?
Let me refer to my, no.
Okay, so not.
Not at all.
All right. Well, we can look into that.
And it's
Obviously,
very important for our people, because right now they're really suffering bad. So we need,
that's a very serious issue. Yeah.
You all know about our famous uranium pit, and so
Yes.
it's just those things we never thought of
Yeah.
at that time. The government knew about those things, but didn't let us know about that.
And there are
which
so
is
many
all-
stories like that. We have to go back and right those wrongs and make sure people have
Appreciate
the
it.
ability to get taken care of with their health care needs. And
It's not only the native communities around there, but the surrounding communities of Grant, San Boyeta, San Rafael, Milan. It's
A lot of
affected
people
that
are working
whole
there.
area in there. The reason why we would really like to push the water rights settlement is because much of the aquifer has been used to do mining.
I heard him say that, and it's like kind of adding insult to the injury already. They get the water and they've injured.
And we're such in a
Yeah.
New Mexico is one of the most, for the state with the most scarcity, I don't know how to say that, scarce water supply.
Right.
And so, there's only one more aquifer that actually ACMA would like to tap into, but we need that settlement in order to make our future stable as far as water goes.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, I really, yeah.
Another word, there's another mine called La Jara on the northwest face of Mount Taylor that's about to go into production, so it's doesn't stop.
I see. Yeah.
That's how critical it is for all of us in the region. So we appreciate some help.
Okay, well, thanks. Hopefully the chair will get it all fixed.
Don't lay it off on
Yeah.
me.
No, we will work together to do whatever we can and certainly visit if that's an opportunity. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. And again, thank you all for being here to testify. One question, and this can be a simple answer, it doesn't have to be long, but you mentioned IHS and how important it is to the, I've had several tribes. It's not coming from me. It's not coming from the president or DOJ or anything else, but several tribes over the last year have said to me, we could do a better job of delivering health services if you would directly fund our people instead of going through a IHS where they take money out, their share or whatever, before it gets down to, so we could do a better job and deliver more services to our people. Is that a common feeling, and I suspect it's different from tribe to tribe, whether they have the infrastructure to be able to do it that way or not, I don't know. But I think it's a question, if we can do more with the dollars that we're using, hey, why not do it? So I've just been asking that in general, and if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, there's the 93-638 process that we've used for our new clinic.
Yeah.
And we get directly funded from IHS, so that's helping a lot.
Okay.
So if we could do that with other programs that we have, that'll be great, to do that. Just to govern ourselves, self-governance is what
Yeah.
I know the United States
Yeah.
looks for native tribes to do, self-sufficiency type thing. So, but that'll be very helpful,
Yeah.
We can.
Well, I'm not trying to criticize IHS by any stretch. I'm just,
Been there, yeah.
it's you need to look at sometimes other ways to do things and see if it makes sense. It might not. I don't know. That's,
Well, I think
like
it
I
all
say, it's not
depends
my
on-
idea.
It all depends on the community.
Yeah.
There's some communities that can afford to take over IHS, supplement the funding, and then make it better. There's other tribes that just aren't there yet, and
Yeah.
we don't have the funding. One of the reasons why IHS gets criticized so much is because they've been historically underfunded and understaffed. They can't provide the health care that they should because of those two factors. Now, it sometimes, like we at Acoma are looking at taking over what's remaining of the hospital, and it's not a whole lot. It went from a full hospital to just basically a clinic, and in the middle of the pandemic, IHS was going to shut it down.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the reasons why we're almost compelled to take it over.
Yeah.
It's not that, we don't believe that the funding or the staffing or the service can be there. It's almost that we're compelled to simply because, like I said, we're underfunded and understaffed.
For Santa Ana, this new IHS facility that we plan on having on our lands, it would be a boon to the community. The IHS facility in Albuquerque is woefully old. I understand it's probably going to be remodeled to some extent, but this new facility on Santa Ana lands will be greatly helping the entire community in the Albuquerque and Sandoval County areas. So we have a very small clinic. The community has always been concerned that doctors and staff, nurses are not available like the entire week. It's like Monday, Tuesday, Friday at certain times, only at certain times.
Yeah.
And we have people with diabetes, Mr. Chairman, and members. Diabetes is rampant everywhere in New Mexico, in Native communities. And for Santa Ana, we just experienced, my brother and I here, Governor Montoya, past weekend we had some ceremonial dances at our old village, and we had people that went down due to low blood sugar. We had to call EMS, and so we want to get out to the community to try and have our community members take care of themselves and make sure that they nutritional needs are met. Someone reaches out to them with how to care for themselves if they have issues in their limbs and that sort of thing. So it's pretty bad. So this new facility would be good for us.
And we're already feeling the advantages of direct funding with our clinic, and we're having great results, and we're all for it, and so.
Okay.
But also to mention the BIE, Bureau of Indian Education. Right now, we're looking at a brand new early childhood and Head Start facility that we looking for funding now, as well as our Laguna Rainbow Center. That's our elderly nursing home. And it's needing replacement for, early 1970s is when it was built. And right now, early last year, we had a flood that came through after heavy rain, and it flooded that whole area, and then water was coming in. They're sealing, so we're looking for funding for those types of facilities. So we'd appreciate any help you guys can give. I know there's a lot on your plate, but
I appreciate it. Thank you for being here today to testify. Did you have anything?
No, sir.
We can take everything that you need and take it out of the Montana tribes because Zinke gave all the Montana tribes yesterday.
beautiful country.
Indian wars are the worst wars.
Anyway, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You too.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Look forward to working with you.
Committee members, there's a copy of our testimony outside, so if you wish to take a look at it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next, we have Chuck Hoskin, Jonadev Chettery, and Rodney Butler. Yeah, there's two names I got right. Okay. Was trying to locate Jonadev, but I've already gotten us behind by asking too many questions. So,
So he's stuck in traffic.
yeah,
Chairman.
I understand that. Believe me.
Should be like 10 minutes out, he said.
Yeah. In Idaho, we don't call that traffic; we call it a parking lot. Chuck, you're first.
Well, Chairman Simpson, Member Pingree, and Congressman Zinke, and the entire subcommittee, on behalf of the Cherokee Nation, we appreciate the time. I'm Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation. Mr. Chairman, my greatest responsibility is protecting our 7,000 square mile reservation and defending tribal sovereignty. The Cherokee Nation has exclusively governed the Cherokee Nation reservation since we were removed to what is now northeast Oklahoma in the 19th century. Under the McGirt decision from the Supreme Court of the United States and other decisions, we continue to exercise that jurisdiction across the reservation. We maintain cross-deputization agreements with every law enforcement agency within our boundaries. We prosecute thousands of cases a year. We put a blanket of protection around everyone. We take this serious. We understand in that regard the impact of every dollar we spend, not only on law enforcement, but on every aspect of what we do as a government, from housing to education to notably health care, where we run an excellent health care system. And to the comments you made earlier, we do it directly with resources from the Indian Health Service. Whether it's the dollars that we generate or whether it's dollars appropriated by this Congress, we take all of them serious. We want to be good stewards of every one of those dollars. In fiscal year 2026, the subcommittee has lots of opportunities to exercise authority over federal spending on Indian affairs, and there's a great deal of course, scrutiny on all federal spending. There's a few things this subcommittee can do. First, you can embrace the ongoing campaign against wasteful spending. We need to reject calls for redundant programs. They need to push back against the establishment of programs that just duplicate what's already happening. That's in the Indian Health Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other agencies. And the second thing the subcommittee can do is to engage in the appropriate oversight of agency decisions, particularly within the Indian Health Service. And I want to direct your attention to the Purchase and Referred Care Program, which is formerly known as Contract Health, and the Joint Venture Construction Program. In recent years, the Indian Health Service has disregarded local decision makers, congressional intent, and stood up parallel programs that's simply a waste of federal health dollars, tribal health dollars, which of course we know are very precious. The backdrop to all of this, Mr. Chairman and members, is that the Cherokee Nation runs a comprehensive healthcare system. I think it's the best in Indian country. We're moving towards a system of wellness that we think ought to be the best in the world. But we have an excellent system. We provide that health care to every beneficiary within our service area, within our reservation. That's every member of every federally recognized tribe, regardless of what tribe they're in. So for FY26, we'd ask the subcommittee to reject additional IHS demands for the so-called new tribes funding, additional funding. This would be, if the IHS does it, the 5th year in a row they've tried to add funding to fund a tribe that's not new, and that's been around for about 70 years. The subcommittee should also guard against wasting these limited dollars by funding services, again, in an area where we already fund all of these services. If any taxpayer in the country, any member of this Congress was interested in wasteful spending, it would be where the IHS tries to stand up to tribal health systems in a country in which we need to spread those dollars equitably and recognize where there is excellence, and there is excellence within the Cherokee Nation Reservation by our health system. The Intertribal Council of the 5 Civilized Tribes has already spoke out on this issue, so I direct your attention to a resolution that calls on Congress to closely scrutinize IHS funding decisions and requests and to ensure that appropriations are used effectively and in alignment with the healthcare needs of tribal nations. That's the 5 large tribes in Oklahoma speaking out on this issue. So we ask the subcommittee to consider these programs and other agency requests to ensure that officials are spending the dollars wisely. Third, the subcommittee can continue to do what it's done such an excellent job of, and I want to express my appreciation for the dollars that have been appropriated for those tribes that are embracing all the opportunities under the McGirt decision. That is a decision that changed the landscape of law enforcement in Indian country in Oklahoma. And within the Cherokee Nation Reservation, we have substantial needs, and we're meeting them with our own dollars, but these dollars appropriated by the Congress, $130 million that the House included in FY25 have been spent wisely and helps us create that blanket of protection and justice for everyone within our reservation. So we'd ask that you maintain that funding in FY26. And finally, yes, we're concerned about waste, fraud, and abuse. I flagged that. But when it comes to freezing funding, reducing staffing for these agencies, that goes to the core, and it concerns me that it goes to the core of the trust responsibilities. We would ask the committee to help us guard against that so we can run efficient programs but not shortchange the Cherokee Nation and the rest of Indian country. I'd be glad to yield for questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Senator. Rodney.
Thank you, Chairman. Wiki Suk, greetings, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, Congressman Zinke, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, Natusawee Rodney Butler, and I proudly serve as the chairman of the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, a community located in our homelands, the oldest continually occupied reservation in the United States, established in 1666, located in present-day southeastern Connecticut. In addition to being the chairman of my nation, I also serve as president of the Native American Financial Officers Association. I'm a member of the Treasury Tribal Advisory Committee, as well as serve as a board member for the United South and Eastern Tribes, the National Congress of American Indians, and the Indian Gaming Association. I want to begin today by underscoring several fundamental truths. Tribal nations are and always have been inherently sovereign governments. We govern our lands, and we provide services aimed at keeping our communities safe. The United States has a trust and treaty obligations rooted in the United States Constitution that it fulfills through both the direct delivery of tribal programs and services and provisions of federal funding to tribal nations and tribal organizations serving tribal nations. The federal employees necessary for the functioning of those tribal programs and disbursement of those tribal funds are a critical part of the trust and treaty obligations. As you consider federal funding priorities, Indian country must be protected from spending cuts, and funding for tribal programs cannot be considered discretionary. To this end, I want to thank Chairman Cole for reiterating this important point in his recent letter to OMB, highlighting that the government-to-government relationship between tribal nations and the United States and the need to honor the trust responsibility. With these principles in mind, I'd like to raise for your consideration several matters that are particularly important for the Mashantucket Pequot, along with the balance of Indian country. First, I would like to highlight the importance of federal support for tribal law enforcement. The Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, like many, has worked diligently to create a safe and secure community for our citizens. However, funding shortfalls leave us confronting a persistent challenge in recruiting and retaining police officers when competing with our state or municipal counterparts, particularly regarding benefits and resources, putting the safety of our citizens and many guests at risk. In 2024, the BIA Office of Justice Services released its report to Congress on public safety and justice programs in Indian country. The findings of this report reveal, among other things, that funding for public safety and justice services in Indian country meet only 12% of the actual need and puts our communities at significant disadvantage when it comes to protecting our citizens. In the 118th Congress, the House Committee on Natural Resources passed H.R. 4524, the Parity for Tribal Law Enforcement Act, with bipartisan support. We urge this Congress to take up and pass similar legislation that will enhance the operational capabilities of tribal law enforcement agencies, ensuring they have the necessary authority, resources, benefits, and training to protect our communities. Second, the 105L leasing program, established under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, allows tribal nations and tribal organizations to lease their own facilities to the federal government for the efficient delivery of services. This program strongly supports self-determination and is a critical avenue for ensuring that tribal nations have the financial resources needed to manage, operate, and maintain infrastructure that serves our communities. This program launched in earnest under President Trump's first term and has continued to flourish significantly since then. And I give a special thanks to Secretary Zinke at the time for launching that program.
I remember that one.
It's a good one. Though mandatory by law, these funds are currently included in the discretionary budget, where they are subject to annual caps, forcing hard choices across agency budgets. For nearly a decade, the Appropriations Committee has recognized the need to reclassify these accounts as mandatory. Keeping these costs under discretionary funding has stifled IHS and BIA budgets, completely disregarding the rising medical inflation and growing tribal populations. We are calling for mandatory funding for 105L leases in the BIA, BIE, and IHS budgets. Our third priority relates to the Department of Treasury. We urge Congress to make the Treasury's Office of Tribal and Native Affairs permanent and to continue working collaboratively with the Treasury Tribal Advisory Committee. These entities are essential for providing technical assistance and guidance and supporting tribal nations and accessing tax incentives and economic development tools that benefit all economies, not just tribal economies. They also play a crucial role in ensuring appropriate tribal consultation on tax and economic policies and facilitating government-to-government engagement. Lastly, we call on Congress to support legislation that would create tax parity for tribal nations, seeking to diversify our economies and invest in our communities. We know this is a top priority for President Trump, and tribes can't be left out this time around. Some key provisions include treating tribal governments the same as states for key tax purposes, including excise tax, bond issuances, pension plans, general welfare benefits, and charitable organizations. Also creating an annual new market tax credit for low-income tribal communities and increasing the effectiveness of the tribal low-income housing tax credit program. On behalf of the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, I say Katapatash. I thank you all for your time and consideration today. We stand ready to work with you and this administration to advance these priorities and uphold the trust and treaty responsibilities that are the bedrock of the federal-tribal relationship. Muimu, be well.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony, and have to get down and see the health clinic the Cherokees are delivering and stuff. But you bring up an issue that several tribes have brought up, and it's one I grew up on the outside, the southern border of my town that I grew up in was the Fort Hall Indian Reservation with the show bands. And for years, I've wondered, how do we get police officers to stay there? Because they come and they get trained. They go through the same training that our state police officers go. They come and they work at Fort Hall. And Pocatello's 25 miles away. Blackfoot's 20 miles away. And as soon as they get on and everything, then they end up going to one of these communities because of better pay and benefits and everything else. That's something that's got to be addressed. And it's not just police officers, it's firefighters and other professionals that we need to be able to attract to the reservations and stay there. Interesting issue, though.
Yeah. Chairman, what we've seen across Indian country is, in particular, it's the benefit portion of it and access to the federal pension program, as other federal officers have access to, would make a world of difference for us in recruiting and retaining qualified police officers on our lands.
Yeah, absolutely. Ms. Pingree?
Yeah, thank you both for your testimony. Chief Hoskin, nice to see you again. I had the opportunity to visit in Oklahoma and see the health clinic, and you're not exaggerating. It was one of the most impressive health clinics I've ever been in, Native American or not. I was down on a family vacation. And I also recall that you were just getting started with a medical school. Interested to know how's the progress going with that. That seems like a really unique opportunity to train people in the medical profession who might later go on to work in another tribal community or in other facilities. So how has that been going?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's incredible. And so here's what we did. We had a partnership with Oklahoma State University. We built the medical school. They are operating the medical school. They now saw the first graduating class nearly a year ago, so last May. Now, this is important. Across the country, less than 1% of med school graduates are Native American. That graduating class was 20%. And then it gets better because that is nestled in a rural setting. It's nestled in, I think, the best in tribal health care. we're flipping the script on what worked against us, which is med school students from the urban areas where we need medical schools, difficult to retain, attract and retain, but we're growing them, so to speak, in this setting, and it's working well so far. We're very excited about it. Thank you for the question.
Oh, that's great. No, I do appreciate the commitment you've made to that, and it really is benefiting everyone else as well. And nice to have a New England tribe visiting us here today as a Mainer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I know you're a really important tribe for the region, and I thought it was interesting, the law enforcement question. How much land do you actually have?
So, unlike my good friend Chief
Yeah.
Hoskins, we reside on 1,600 acres in southeastern Connecticut. I mean, colonization.
Which in Connecticut isn't a small amount.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a small amount in Connecticut, but it's not like your fellow tribes in Maine that are sitting on tens of thousands of
Yeah,
acres. And
yeah.
so, but we are responsible for roughly 10 million visitors a year that travel through Mashantucket.
Exactly, yeah.
And so the police force that we have is larger than the community per se needs, given the small population. But given our breadth of reach over, non-natives, it's certainly nowhere near the levels it should be. And as the chairman pointed out, we are constantly recruiting. They get post-certified through the state and immediately move on and leave Mashantucket for better-paying jobs.
Especially in
and
a state
pension
like
program.
Connecticut where there are
Absolutely.
good wages. But I can imagine you have law enforcement concerns being where you are. And, we certainly know from our state, since we were traditionally not a gaming state, we send a lot of buses of people to Connecticut
Thank you.
to visit your casino. The one other thing, maybe if you could follow up, I thought it was interesting to think about in our coming tax bill where tribes aren't getting the benefits of some of the tax provisions. So maybe you could send us some more detail on some of the areas that you think we should be vigilant about making
Absolutely.
sure it gets covered,
Certainly
because
will.
I think that's a good opportunity for economic development and opportunities. So thank you very much. Thanks, both of you, for being here.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, what do they call the medical school? Is it the university or Oklahoma State University Medical School, or?
It's Oklahoma State University College of Osteopathic Medicine at the Cherokee Nation.
All right, cool. That's
Heck of a t-shirt.
but that's really good to know, because I've mentioned with the other tribes that I've been meeting with this week and stuff that the only way you're going to solve the problem of getting teachers, getting medical professional, having been a dentist in the real world, getting dentists out on some of these reservations, we've got to educate the kids and get them into medical school. 90% of the time they'll come back to their reservation to serve and stuff. So that's exciting to hear.
Thank you. If I could add one thing, there's a program OSU has that we host, which is called Operation Orange. Orange is the school colors, but it's just what you said. So it's middle school students coming in to see what they could be. You know, the old saying, you can't be what you can't see. Well, they can see it, and they're going to be the doctors of tomorrow.
Yeah, fascinating. Mr. Zinke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you again.
Always.
I remember the scar tissue. I remember the state of Connecticut wrote the Department of Interior a letter that says on the casino, if we approve it, it's done. If we don't approve it, it's done. It's out. If we don't say anything, it's already approved. And just so you know, you hear it from me, is that if it's off reservation, I think you should be handled just like everybody else. You're free to buy apartments, you're free to buy casinos and stuff like that. From my perspective, when I was secretary, trust property is on the reservation. Off reservation, you're free to do whatever you desire because you're a citizen like everyone else. So that's the decision, and it was. I remember the scar tissue.
Yeah.
But good to see you again.
Always.
But my position is remain unchanged.
Yeah.
As a sovereign nation, you're free to buy apartments and businesses and stuff like that anywhere you want without penalty.
Yeah.
So, I don't think
Appreciate that.
Interior should say yes or no off reservation. That's not the Interior's job. So thanks.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. And thank you for both for being here today and testifying. We appreciate it. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
We're now going to go to panel number 3 with an addition. Jonadev, is that how you pronounce your name? Okay. You'll be up here. Michael? Hicks, Cheyenne Robinson, Victoria? It's Michelle, sorry. We were trying to decide whether that was Michelle or Michael. Yeah, I understand that.
asked about it. I thought you might have
Consistent.
the name.
Mike. Oh, wow. That's a picture from the school too.
Okay, cool.
It really is.
That's Cherokee Nation. That's good.
Good morning. How you doing?
Yeah, that's good.
That's so exciting. Yeah, congratulations on that. Yeah, nice to see you.
Morning, Victoria.
Oh, was there a punch?
Okay, John Deb, you're first. I understand you got caught up in traffic. Crazy, isn't it?
GW Parkway.
Yeah, I understand, believe me.
Turned out to be an hour-long drive rather than a 20-minute
Yeah.
drive. But thank you so much for working with me.
Yeah.
So, Chairman, Ranking Member Pingree, and all members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. I serve as ambassador of the Muskogee Creek Nation, the fourth largest tribal nation in the United States. The Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation spans over 3.2 million acres, is home to well over 1 million people, and covers 8 full counties and parts of 3 more in eastern Oklahoma. Muskogee Creek Nation represents the interests of over 100,000 enrolled tribal citizens and many more native and non-native citizens who call our reservation home. My nation has a long history of shared and cooperative governance with the United States. As one of the 3 separate sovereigns enshrined in the United States Constitution, Indian tribes receive funding not because we are the benefactors of any particular party's political agenda. Instead, we receive funding because our cooperative and collaborative relationship with the United States goes back to the signing of the U.S. Constitution. Indeed, one of the very first things that George Washington did as president was to sign a treaty with my nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation. Because of that treaty and hundreds more, the United States gained a territory to govern. None of the policies, executive orders, or mandates issued by the current administration should be interpreted as requiring any agency to forsake the United States constitutional commitments to tribal nations. If any tribal funding or programs are going to be cut, truncated, or eliminated, those eliminations should only come as the result of actual consideration of the particular funding stream or program being cut. Cuts or freezes at DOI, HHS, DOT, or any other department that helps administer this nation's solemn treaty and trust responsibilities to Indian nations threatens to prevent Native children from being bused to their schools, Native prisoners in federal jails from eating meals, and our roads from being paved. Weakening tribal nations makes Americans of all stripes less safe and erodes the foundations of our great country. Federal funding for education, healthcare, land management, cultural preservation, and tribal economic development constitutes a critical lifeblood across Indian country. It should not be restricted without careful and considerate thought. Following our nation's historic victory in the United States Supreme Court in Oklahoma versus McGirt in 2020, when the Supreme Court affirmed the continued existence of our Muskogee Reservation, the Trump administration made commitments and took significant steps to ensure that our tribal law enforcement, victim services, and other agencies that protect public safety were fully funded. Since 2020, the nation has entered into 64 cross-deputization agreements with city governments, municipal partners, and state agencies. We have expanded our police force from 30 officers in 2020 to 125 officers. As of 2024, the nation has received over 4,500 criminal referrals from non-Indian governments, referred over 4,300 criminal matters to non-Indian governments, and issued over 1,800 civil and criminal sanctions for violations. To meet the 380% increase in the MCN court docket, the nation, using federal dollars previously appropriated by this committee, along with a significant amount of tribal dollars, has invested heavily into the administrative and physical infrastructure of our court systems. Likewise, detention facilities have high operation costs due to staffing needs, liability, space requirements, and required medical facilities. For example, for a government or private entity to construct a new 1,000-bed facility, which is needed in our part of Oklahoma, the estimated cost would range from $100 to $150 million, and this does not account for the ongoing cost of annual operations. Finally, based on FY24 funding levels, there exists a funding shortfall of over $12 million for MCN's agricultural and natural resources programs and functions. Therefore, the nation would request that the House retain existing funding mechanisms and could consider increasing capacity building funds to support land management and development activities. Today, we ask Congress to appropriate mandatory funding to ensure that the promises made in the treaties our nation signed with the United States are fulfilled and not forgotten. Funding tribal nations is not a Democrat thing, it's not a Republican thing, it's an American thing. And America cannot be great if America breaks its fundamental promise she made to tribal nations that made the sovereignty of the United States possible. It is with that understanding that we appear humbly before you today, asking the United States to commit to fully fund tribal nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for moving. Michelle.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Chairman, thank you. Shiona guy. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, Chairman. Thank you. Congressman Zinke, thank you. Congressman Pingree. I've traveled all your territories, and you guys have some wonderful hot springs in southern Idaho. I took my family through there a few years ago. You also probably have some of the best beadwork at the Shoshone-Bannock tribe. And again, I've hunted in both your states. I won't disclose the tribes that have that, but beautiful territory. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here. It is a pleasure. And I also want to say thank you for, back in the fall, obviously, we had a significant damage to our area with Hurricane Helene. And I know there's been a lot of efforts to help. Our tribe was a central hub to a lot of that support. And we forwarded over $10 million of water supplies, medical supplies, all elements to help our neighbors. We had substantial damage. We didn't lose any lives, but our neighbors did. And, the damage is just indescribable. But thank you, for your help. Just a little bit about Eastern Band Cherokee. We're located in western North Carolina, and we are a 16,000 plus member tribe. We are the Cherokees that remained in the Great Smoky Mountains. We resisted the removal and the Trail of Tears. And so we reside on, again, 56,000 acres of land. And, for centuries, the Cherokee people have fiercely protected our separate cultural identity. Without question, it's important to us. We have a living, breathing culture with a unique spoken and written language. And, we know there were times, of the boarding schools to where harm was applied, to our nations. And, a lot of trauma was incurred, but, we have survived. And now, as I go through some of the detail, I'll describe one of the facilities that we have, a language academy that is teaching Cherokee language as the first language. And so, again, just proud of our history. As I think about, where we are, and I've been doing this a long time. I'm in my fourth term. Been working for the tribe for a long time. I'm a 31-year CPA, so I've played with numbers a lot in my life, and glad to be here to hopefully make our tribal government stronger. But I'm concerned about the issues for our native tribes and Alaska Nation, especially around this diversity, equity, inclusion. We are sovereign nations, and again, I want to be clear about that. I come before you today to ensure that there were solemn promises to our nations, between this government and I'm requesting today that again, redefining does not impact sovereign nations and the government-to-government relationships. We feel strongly about that, obviously, and again, we just appreciate, the respect of who we are. And, it's great to hear some of the other leaders this morning, which, I've known for a long time, just talking about, water rights and, what we're trying to protect. And, there's a lot here. We employ about 6,000 employees in western North Carolina, and I don't want to argue with Chief Hoskins with Cherokee Nation, but we have a great health system too, and I want to tell you about it. He's done a wonderful job, and they've done some great things in the state of Oklahoma. So I give them credit for a lot of that. We also have a hospital facility that has been renewed just a few years ago, but we've expanded that hospital to not just be your normal pharmacy and just general services, but we have a lot of physical therapy services. We've included an extension around mental health services, and we're all dealing with mental health, in our areas, drug related, et cetera. And of course, we just finished a new senior service. It's 100-bed senior services that provide wonderful care to our people. We also operate a number of other community health services, various recreation programs. In Cherokee, we have about 250 miles of roads that we manage. Roads and, of course, the water and sewer. Broadband, we own over 350 miles of broadband in western North Carolina. And, we've been in that business for over 20 years now. Of course, home ownership is something that's big for us. And, of course, public safety. With my travels, as being chief or, with being in business, public safety is a major issue in Indian country. And, I've done a lot of travel out in the plains, especially, and law enforcement, as you guys were speaking of earlier. It's just something that, has to, remain a priority. And, as I was speaking earlier just about the language academy, we have 60 students in our language academy. We also teach it in our schools, which is a BIE school. We are a 638 school. We manage the resources that come to the schools, so we try to minimize your point earlier and try to be as efficient as we possibly can. And so again, we're proud of teaching our language. We're proud of our culture. We're proud of our history, and we don't want to get caught up in this new definition. And again, I know I've said it a couple of times. You may hear it some more, but it's important to us. We also operate our own daycare systems and secondary schools, in addition to a court system. Within our court, we have a 100-bed jail that has been in place about 10 years, and again, we're very proud of that. I know I'm limited on time here, so I'll hurry. It's important that we continue to fund the BIA. I've been talking with our superintendent. We have about 1,400 students in our school system. They do a wonderful job. They meet all the standards, and in the state of North Carolina that are required. But our school is beyond just being a learning institution. It's a historical institution. It's a cultural institution, and that's important to us. And again, we are proud of that facility. We also, again, with our health facilities, IHS funding is important to us. We're a compacted hospital, so in other words, we're at the third level of funding, to where the federal funding flows down, but we have our own hospital authority, we have our own board, we have our own CEO that manages that facility, and so it does minimize some of the bureaucracy, if you will. In addition to we live in the Great Smoky Mountains, and we're in a beautiful territory, similar to you guys, and making sure the air, the water, the land is pure is something that's extremely important to us. So EPA fund and things of that nature. And as I close here today, again, I thank you for all your work, and as you go into the the budget cycles, just keep these priorities in mind. And one last point is, we think there are some efficiencies within various agencies. There are some state groups in the state of North Carolina that are not fairly recognized, that are receiving substantial funds, and we think that is concerning. They found loopholes within the systems, and we think as you guys go through this evaluation process, that would be beneficial to take a peek at some of these funding levels that are not supporting federally recognized tribes, but it's state-recognized groups that are achieving some of this funding, and it's substantial dollars. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. Cheyenne, you're next.
Ionia, good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Cheyenne Robinson. I have the honor of serving as the Secretary of the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony regarding fiscal year 26 budget appropriations for Indian Health Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Bureau of Indian Education. I come to you today as an elected leader of my tribal nation, whose government-to-government relationship with the United States is rooted in our sovereign status and formalized through our 1865 treaty. The chronic underfunding of IHS, BIA, and BIE undermines a solemn promise and directly impacts the health and public safety of our tribal citizens. While the Omaha tribe has many critical needs, we are focusing on a couple priorities for fiscal year 26. $3.2 billion plus up for Bureau of Indian Affairs, specifically Office of Justice Services, $26 million for an Omaha Tribal Justice Center, $500,000 for a planning investment for the Omaha Tribal Justice Center, and a $40 million increase to expand the Tiwahe initiative. In addition to Omaha Tribe individual priorities, we also support the advance appropriation for tribal programs and services through fiscal year 27, funding mandatory contract support costs and Section 105 leases. Additionally, exempt agencies for reduction in force to ensure that there is capacity to staff and carry out trust and treaty obligations. In a series of treaties with the United States culminating in the 1865, the Omaha Nation ceded millions of acres of the richest farmland in America in exchange for treaty and trust obligations surrounding health, education, housing, continued self-government, law and order, and the promise of a livable tribal community. These contractual agreements were not acts of government sponsorship, but legal binding obligations based on our political classification as a distinct tribal sovereign nation. To the extent of our health, education, employment, housing, facility maintenance, and need indicators, these trust and treaty obligations are not being met. The Omaha Tribe of Nebraska fully believes that funding these treaty-based appropriations and the establishment of a comprehensive multi-purpose Omaha Nation Justice Center will address a multitude of critical needs. And I want to give some perspective on ground level on what we deal with on the Omaha Tribe Reservation. The tribe's current correctional facility is antique, just like many other throughout Indian country. The jail is dilapidated, unsafe, and ill-equipped to manage the needs of individuals with substance use disorders and mental health issues, and in general, the fentanyl crisis. The Omaha Tribe is requesting the subcommittee to explore opportunities within the budget reconciliation process to address law and order issues within Indian country, including correction facilities in congruence with President Trump's law and order and border security priorities. Additionally, we request that you direct, in report language, the planning of new institutions program to work with the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska to begin phase 1 of the planning process. In closing, we support Indian country priorities in Indian Health Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Bureau of Indian Education. A reduction in force is an arbitration of treaty and trust obligations and further reduces our already deficit capacity to provide needed services to our tribal citizens. We urge you to provide stability in this uncertain budget climate. And on behalf of the Omaha Tribe, we thank this committee for holding this hearing. We look forward to working with you in the future, and you can find further details of our ask in my testimony. Wibaha.
Victoria.
Good morning. My name is Victoria Kichian. I have the honor of serving as the chairwoman of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I would like to start by thanking this subcommittee for being a good partner to Indian country and your fiscal 25 increases. And we're pleased that many of the things we were here last year advocating for made it in through those increases. So thank you for listening. That brings us to our 26 priorities, and we encourage the subcommittee to increase funding for the BIA public safety and justice programs. The BIA law enforcement staff shortages and overall insufficient level of police services has been a long-standing issue on the Winnebago Reservation. We currently have 2 correction officers for the Winnebago Police Department and 2 positions that remain vacant. Previously, the BIA positions were left vacant by District 1 intentionally. The tribe eventually learned that those vacant positions were absorbed without consultation and no longer exist in our budget. So the failure for the BIA to provide sufficient law enforcement staffing has our tribe has become reliant on tribal police officers as well as conservation officers. You know, they're supposed to be looking out for the lay of the land, and we have to bring them to patrol for safety. The lack of adult and juvenile detention facilities at Winnebago is further contributing to our serious public safety concerns. The closest detention facilities are located on the Omaha Reservation and in Thurston County. However, the BI often does not have active contracts with those facilities, or those facilities do not have availability. And we heard from my colleague here that their jail needs repairs and is antiquated. And so we utilize that jail as well. But without a local BIA contract with jails such as the Omaha Nation and Thurston County, our law enforcement are forced to drive 5 hours round trip to detention facilities. And so when we don't have boots on the ground and we have to drive distance to put people in corrections, it's an issue. The lack of local correction facility contracts, allowing existing contracts to expire, and continually failing to provide adequate law enforcement is completely unacceptable. The tribe fully supports the increase of criminal investigations and police services and detentions, corrections in the FY25 legislation, and encourage the same increases for 26. Next, the tribe encourages Subcommittee to increase funding for mental health programs at IHS. Tribal members throughout Indian country are struggling with serious mental health issues and often face burdens in receiving life-saving care. The hospital, 12 Clans Unity Hospital in Winnebago, is unable to provide that necessary treatment, so they need to be transferred to a higher level of care and that are equipped to handle those emergencies. For 35 years, the IHS has been receiving funding to address these situations, but the tribe hasn't been able to access these funds. As a result of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals 1978 decision in White v. Califano, Congress has been appropriating funds to IHS since 1990 to pay for involuntary commitment of reservation Indians in state mental facilities. Up until 2023, the tribe was unaware of those funds, known as the Califano Fund. Since that time, we've been working with IHS to clarify eligibility and the parameters around that fund. In August 2024, IHS confirmed that all Great Plains tribes within the 8th Circuit are eligible for the Califano Fund. But the proposal is to utilize area share methodology, which the tribe is okay with, but we've been cut out of that $1.75 million fund for 35 years. And so based on our rough calculation, we'd receive $75,000 annually. This is, amongst 17 tribes. So there's $2.5 million that the Winnebago tribe was cut out of over 35 years. And so we're encouraging the subcommittee to provide substantial increases to that funding, as well as overall funding for the Califano Fund. Finally, the tribe encourages the subcommittee to increase funding for tribal colleges and universities. Enrollment at Little Priest Tribal College, also known as LPTC, has doubled in the last 4 years. Spring enrollment was at 225, the highest enrollment. Our graduation rates have increased. Programs have expanded from 6 to 12 programs. But much like many infrastructure in Indian country, it's antiquated, 20 to 70 years old. Improvements and repairs on campus are necessary to have a adequate learning environment. And so the museum, student services, food service building, administration building was built in 1954. And it's actually a former orphanage. Like these buildings have been repurposed. This wasn't, built to be a college. So we have a master plan, and we hope to expand that to adjacent 10-acre site. And so that's an estimated $60 million project. But with these increased costs for all these construction projects, we really need this subcommittee to continue to promote that growth and funding to increase for tribal colleges and universities, facilities improvement and repair. So the Winnebago tribe appreciates this time. We come every year. This is a great opportunity just to have some face time and share the programs on the ground on my reservation that are impacted by these increases and are harmed by decreases. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. It's a good time for us, too, not just for you, but it's a good time for us to get to learn what's going on out in Indian country and stuff. You got a great representative that I talked to several times when the hurricane hit up there and stuff to see how y'all were doing, and he kept very good track of what was needed and stuff. So
Congressman Edwards is doing a wonderful job for us.
Yes.
Yeah, we're very proud of him.
Anyway, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it very much, Shelley.
Yeah, just reiterate that. Thank you all for all of your testimony, different issues, but many of which we've been hearing about, certainly on law enforcement. And it was a good reminder that, we often talk about the lack of law enforcement personnel and the difficulties there, but it's also the facilities like detention facilities, and we have to make sure that we're investing enough in that and that the wait time isn't forever to get those things fixed and repairs. And it's interesting to hear from the Oklahoma tribes how the McGirt decision has perhaps put a little bit more cash infusion into that. Obviously not as much as you need. I don't discount that because the change in the jurisdictions, just that you said you had 64 cross agreements, with local communities. That's huge to get all that negotiated, but impressive to see that you're doing that and that you have the number of officers that you do. But clearly it shows that, a little bit of money can make some of these things start working. But I know we'll hear from the chair that we haven't done enough for the McGirt settlement, so that will certainly get our attention. And also tribal colleges. Yeah, I think another really important, we talk a lot about, the value of getting an education and make sure that BIE facilities have enough, but tribal colleges are really important. And our hearts went out to everyone in North Carolina. So thank you for the good work your tribe was doing to help your neighbors. That was very impressive. And many of the other things you have going on are great to hear about. So
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
I was just going to say that you got the right chairman of this full committee to get McGirt.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Zinke?
Oh, and Chairman, Ranking Member, to kind of dovetail on that just briefly, I think everybody in this room and certainly the committee recognizes the importance of these congressional hearings. I just want to put one last exclamation point on that. We talked about one of the very first treaties that the United States entered into being the Treaty of New York in 1790 with Muskogee Nation. That was on the heels of the ratification of the Constitution as we know it today. And as we know, that Constitution was an improvement on the Articles of Confederation that distributed authority among the colonies in terms of their work with various tribes. That caused issues, and that relationship with tribal nations was one of the things that was centralized under the new Constitution for a reason. And later case law, namely the Marshall Trilogy, further clarified that Congress has the preeminent role in engaging with tribal nations, certainly with respect to the judiciary and the executive branch. The plenary authority of Congress and its responsibility to uphold treaty and trust responsibilities is paramount. So appropriations hearings such as this are absolutely fundamental because it's Congress who can really play the long game, look at things like McGirt, look at things like education, and really fully fund for the long term, for long planning. That was recognized by our founding framers in the Constitution as we know it today. And so your work today is solemn in that regard to uphold the foundations of this republic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Did you have?
No, sir. Good to see you all.
Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your testimony. We appreciate the work you do out there. We look forward to working with you to solve some of these problems. Appreciate it. Huh? No, I'm fine. Next, we got Doreen, David, and Cynthia. I can actually pronounce the last names there. Yeah. I could look like I knew what I was doing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you for being here, Doreen. Long trip, huh? So anyway, you're first. Go ahead.
Uvlalota, good morning. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of this subcommittee. On behalf of the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope Tribal Council, I want to thank you for this important opportunity to discuss our appropriation priorities for FY 2026 with you. My name is Doreen Levitt, and I serve as the ICAS Tribal Council Secretary and Director of Natural Resources. ICAS is one of two federally recognized regional Alaska Native tribal governments in Alaska that provides services to more than 13,478 ICAS tribal members, about half of whom are also duly enrolled in the Native village tribes of Unuktuvik Pass, Utkasuk, Barrow, Kaktovik, Nuiqsut, Point Hope, Point Lay, and Wainwright. Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope is a landless tribe with a service delivery area larger than the state of Minnesota, located in America's Arctic, which makes delivering services challenging and costly. We are faced with unique obstacles: weather, location, a changing landscape, reliance on planes and barges to ship in basic supplies, food, lack of redundancy in critical broadband infrastructure, workforce and housing shortages, and much more. For this reason, we are here today to highlight 3 appropriation requests in addition to those in my written testimony. First, we ask the subcommittee to fully fund the BIA and provide additional earmark funds to end ICAS's 30-plus years of flat, inadequate funding. For the past 30 years, ICAS has received little to no increases in our federal funding. And of the funding we receive, there is often not enough dollars to make an impact on our communities beyond paying salaries or portions thereof for staff who are doing the best they can with the limited resources available to them. With the resources Congress provided to us to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, ICAS strategically bolstered our governance infrastructure, improved the delivery of our services, and hired additional staff to manage the increased workload. However, this funding will run out by the end of 2026, forcing ICAS to look at other innovative ways to offset our revenue. This should not be our sole responsibility. Your trust obligation requires you to provide meaningful services to our people, and we need your support to fund long-term solutions to chronic underfunding. Second, increase funding for social services and ICWA. This funding is critical to supporting the next generation of ICAS families that struggle with economic, social, mental, and physical health ailments. ICAS currently only receives enough funding to pay our employees that serve the native village of Point Lay. With high mortality rates in our Arctic communities, our funding is not enough to provide the critical services our youth and families need. If we truly want to put an end to intergenerational trauma, Congress must dedicate additional dollars to support these families. Third, provide resources for building necessary broadband redundancy. Many federal programs supporting broadband development and deployment do not support building necessary redundancy to accommodate for the realities of our region. On June 11th, 2023, sea ice severed the undersea fiber optic cable, which connects the Arctic Slope to internet and cell phone service coverage. Because of the lack of redundant broadband infrastructure, there were outages across the entire Arctic Slope. ICAS tribal members were not only disconnected from communication with the outside world, but more importantly, they were unable to access critical services needed for everyday life, such as medical and public safety. Phones stopped working, hospitals and clinics suffered from unusable medical equipment, local flights were stopped, and sadly, a young child died because the family was unable to call emergency services. In January 2025, sea ice once again damaged the subsea fiber optic cable, causing widespread internet outages in Alaska. While ICAS tried to apply for funds through the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant, we were unfairly denied because NTIA deemed our service area served. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Reconnect Broadband Program also deems our area served. I can tell you firsthand, we are not adequately served. We need this subcommittee to provide additional dollars through DOI to ensure there is necessary broadband redundancy in our region so we can promote the well-being of our tribal members. Clean-up, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Simpson. Thank you, Chairman Simpson, ranking members and members of the subcommittee for this opportunity. My name is Shao Butts. Okay, my name is Charlotte Gwatz. My English name is Cynthia Peterson, and I serve as the president of the Yakutat Tlingit tribe. For over 34 years, we have provided services to our citizens while uplifting our community's cultural, social, and economic well-being. We have 820 citizens, and our traditional territory in the Yakutat Borough encompasses nearly 10,000 square miles. We sincerely appreciate your recent historic investments in Indian country. To build off these victories, we urge you to remember that your trust and treaty responsibility to tribal nations exist, irrespective of Congress's separate goal to balance the budget. I offer the following recommendations for FY26. The IHS has long been undersourced, yet its funding is constantly interrupted. Earlier this year, tribal health programs like ourselves feared that our desperately needed funding was frozen when the OMB issued a memorandum pausing federal financial assistance. This uncertainty greatly impacts our patient care. We respect the efforts of Congress to balance the federal budget. However, the IHS budget is so small that its cuts do not result in federal savings, but they do devastate our citizens. We urge Congress to permanently exempt the IHS from budget cuts, sequestrations, recessions, and funding freezes. While Medicaid is not within the purview of this subcommittee, we ask you to protect our access to it. Our facilities get 30 to 60% of funding from Medicaid, but we only account for 0.2% of the total program spending. In other words, cutting tribal access to Medicaid would not save federal money, but it would force us to roll back the care we do provide. We implore Congress to exempt services received through IHS and tribal programs from counting towards any funding cap, as was done in 2017. We continue to advocate for advance appropriations and support your proposal to expand to healthcare and sanitation facility construction. We appreciate the subcommittee's commitment to fully funding CSC and Section 105L leases, but we are concerned that they are still within discretionary appropriations despite their obligatory nature. Here, they continue to take up a larger percentage of overall IHS spending, and we are very worried that Congress will cut into other tribal programs to pay for these increases, especially after the Baraka ruling. To protect all IHS funding, we urge you to enact mandatory appropriations for CSC and 105L leases. In recent years, the cost of air travel in Alaska has skyrocketed to unsustainable levels given how often our patients must fly to receive any health care. Indeed, in FY23, the Alaska Tribal Health System overspent its PRC allocation by $44 million. We therefore urge you to allocate an additional $50 million to the Alaska area for PRC. We support moving away from competitive grants for Indian country. Grants unfairly pit tribes against each other for resources we all deserve. The federal trust responsibility does not require that we clear obstacles to see services provided to our citizens. Tribes must divert limited staff to apply for these federal grants and comply with their requirements, thereby diluting the usefulness of the resources. Instead, we request widespread, flexible, formula-based funding across all of our programs. We appreciate Congress's investment in IHS sanitation facilities through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has funded over 200 projects in Alaska Native communities. Yet, with multi-billion-dollar backlog and growing inflation, funding to close out the list is insufficient, and many facilities are left unsafe. We recommend increases for healthcare and sanitation facilities construction. Over the last 60 years, CHAP has provided critical health care to rural communities in Alaska. The IHS insufficiently funds the Alaska area to operate CHAP, including for training and certification. We ask for recurring operational funds for this program. Tribal programs are chronically understaffed due to underfunding and extreme remoteness. We thank the subcommittee for proposing a 12% increase to the hospitals and health clinics account and urge you to dedicate resources for staff housing. Alaska Native communities rely on SDPI to address alarming rates of diabetes. SDPI's success rests on its flexibility to incorporate cultural and local needs. While we understand it's not within your jurisdiction, we ask you to support permanent reauthorization at a minimum of $200 million with a self-governance option. Finally, we have been devastated by an ongoing opioid epidemic, yet funding remains extremely limited. In FY24, Congress only appropriated $2 million. That's less than $1 per IHS patient for detoxification services. We urge you to increase resources for behavioral health. Thank you so much for your consideration. I look forward to our continued partnership. Ganesh Chish. Thank you.
Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. It's my honor to be here today. I'm grateful for this opportunity. My name is David Boxley. I'm a Simpson of the Lachibu Wolf Clan. I'm a councilman of the Metlakatla Indian community. In 1891, the United States established the beautiful Annette Islands Reserve in southern southeast Alaska, and in doing so, created a sacred trust relationship between us. I've traveled a long way and at great expense to ask Congress to increase its financial support to help us fulfill Congress's intent that the reserve will serve as my people's permanent home to build a brighter, self-sufficient future for the next generation. We appreciate your recent historic investments in Indian country, which reflect the United States sacred trust and treaty responsibility to tribal nations and a recognition of the substantial needs of Indian country. We ask you today that you permanently exempt the IHS and BIA budget from any cuts, sequestrations, rescissions, and funding freezes. Indian country programs that my tribe relies on have long been under-resourced, and just weeks ago, we feared that our desperately needed funding was frozen by the OMB. Although their memo was walked back, my people were afraid for their future, and that kind of fear is a powerful enemy to progress. We need your help. I offer the following specific recommendations for FY26. Increased funding for our programs is crucial. Due to escalating drug use like fentanyl coming in from neighboring Ketchikan, our social services program, fire department, and emergency medical services desperately need support, and foster care placements are at an all-time high. We're grateful for and urge you to enact the proposed $300 million increase to the BIA for FY26. We also request advance appropriation for the BIA. Full advance appropriations for the BIA would lead to better stability and improve everything overall. While funding stability is a reasonable goal for any responsible government, it also instills what is perhaps a most important attribute of good governance, a sense of hope and optimism among its citizens. Our Tamers Creek hatchery, the largest native-owned hatchery in the nation, is on track to rival the output of the largest hatcheries in Alaska, providing not only economic and food security for our people, but the entire region as well. We appreciate the proposed increase to the Fish, Wildlife, and Park sub-activity and ask you to ensure its enactment into law. The Pacific Salmon Treaty was negotiated between the U.S. and Canada to prevent overfishing. We thank you for proposing a $1.6 million increase for this program. Also, we need a tagging trailer to monitor and manage the salmon populations. Our sole source of municipal water is the Chester Lake Reservoir, maintained by a dam constructed in 1985. Heavy rainfall often causes overflow, which results in a loss of water supply that is most valuable during drought conditions. We need to raise the dam an additional 15 feet to increase our resiliency, especially in times of drought. We received an email last night that we are technically in a drought at the moment. NOAA informed us of that. We urge the subcommittee to allocate more funding to the safety of dams and dam maintenance accounts. Our community is currently working to revitalize our endangered heritage language, Somaliak. We have received and are grateful for language grants, but this funding is not guaranteed year after year. It is unreasonable to expect meaningful progress toward language revitalization in a single year, especially with the limited availability of fluent-speaking elders, which is a direct result of U.S. government school policy. We ask you to initiate a direct, sustained funding model for native languages as part of our compacts. I'd like to echo Yakutat's words about Medicaid and contract support costs and 105L leases. It's an interesting coincidence that we're sitting here together. The Yakutat Tlingit people and the Tsimshians have had a long relationship. I'm honored to be testifying at the same time. So we implore Congress to exempt services received through IHS and tribal programs from counting towards any funding cap, as was done in 2017. And we urge you to enact mandatory appropriations for contract support costs and 105L leases. Metlakatlans have the fortitude to withstand the challenges that face us, but we need Congress to stand with us. We need funding increases to fulfill Congress's intent. Our ancestors showed their faith in the United States' promise to protect and secure our new home when they raised the Star-Spangled Banner on that sandy beach in 1887. Today, I have the same hope and faith that Congress's intent in 1891 will be fulfilled. When we recommend increases in baseline funding to IHS and the BIA, we are asking in the context of the trust relationship between Metlakatla and the United States. I come before this esteemed committee today and hope that Congress will invest in our future, that our trust relationship will grow stronger, and that together we will bring prosperity to our whole region. What is good for Metlakatla is good for Alaska, and what is good for Alaska is good for America. I'm Loth Wildstrom. Thank you for your time and attention and for listening. Thank you.
Quick question. I'm curious. 15 feet's a lot on a dam to raise. Who runs it now? Is it Bureau of Rec? Who manages the dam?
The last information I received was that the safety of dams had been the ones that we'd been in contact with, but we run it, as far as I know. Okay. We've done, there have been engineering studies to say that 15 feet was the optimal amount for what we needed to do.
Okay. All right. Our ranking member, the gentlewoman from Maine.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you all. Everyone comes a long way, but we know the Alaskans come a particularly long way, so appreciate that. When you were talking about broadband redundancy, that's something I haven't really thought about much. And also serving on agriculture, you know, I've been involved in the USDA funding and then the funding through here, and I represent Maine, so broadband availability is a big issue to us as well. Nothing like Alaska, but, you know, a very rural state. So when you talk about redundancy, what's the preferred sort of second method? I'm very familiar with the damaging of undersea cables, since that's also an issue in our coastal state, but where do you go for the redundancy?
So Inupiat Community of the Arctic Slope has applied for the FEMA BRIC grant to provide that redundant line that will go from, they call it GMT2, which is near Nuiqsut, to Barrow, that will provide that redundant line. But
so it's an overground?
It's overground, yeah, overground, and it kind of just sinks into the tundra. And it's about a 40-year life expectancy.
Got it. But right now, because, and I've seen that, you know, people often argue about what is adequate coverage, but you're saying, you know, you have to deal with the fact of no coverage. So right now it's not allowed. Redundancy isn't allowed in either of those programs.
Yeah. The NTIA grant we applied for said we are served. The USDA said we're served as well.
Yeah. So that's something we could certainly look into.
Thank you.
And again, you know, so many of the issues that you brought up, and again, I think a couple of you talked about Medicaid. We have to make sure that Medicaid funding isn't cut, because that's often a little understood fact that a lot of the IHS funding actually comes through Medicaid. And it is shocking to think that there's $1 per person for detox. That's not even a real number. So, yeah, and we know how much the, you know, drug issue has hit Indian country as well as so many of our rural communities. And the one thing that you brought up, so do you not have access, you said you don't have a permanent home. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, and when Congress established our reserve, in the wording of our establishment, it says to make a permanent home for the Metlakatlans. So that's what I was referring to.
Okay.
Congress's intent when we were founded.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your testimony. Really appreciate your being here. And
I just said I appreciate the long distance, the long ways to come, but it emphasizes the point. It's a long ways between places in Alaska.
Yeah.
So
the air travel issue that you mentioned and moving patients, I'm sure that's very real. Oh, well. Yeah. Huh.
For the record, King Cove needs a road.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, next panel, please. Mr. Lewis has to leave really quick, right? Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry to hear about the issues on the reservation. We'll put you first, and then you can head out. I'm sorry to hear that. So our next panel, and is it Chairman? Governor. I know you have an appointment. We'll let you go first and go right into it. Sir, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the committee for giving me this opportunity. I am Stephen Rowe Lewis, Governor of the Gila River Indian Community, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the community today. Today I'm joined by Councilwoman Neda Salaya from our District 4 and Councilman Joseph Manuel Jr. from our District 3 Gila River Indian Community Council. Now, I've always appreciated the opportunity to testify here in front of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee on our funding needs. I know there is never enough funding to go around, but this subcommittee has consistently taken the time to set aside several days to hear Indian country's tribal funding priorities. Now, it is the process that starts the funding decisions for tribal programs, staffing, and priorities for this administration. I want to apologize in advance. Again, thank you to the committee members and to my fellow tribal leaders on this panel. I need to leave immediately after my remarks because I have to catch the earliest flight out of D.C. to be back in my community to unfortunately address some public safety issues that are occurring. But I feel compelled today nonetheless, based on the events in my community and based on the meetings that I've had this week at federal agencies and here in Congress, to use my time to speak directly to all of you about how the actions that are being taken here in Washington, D.C. are impacting our community, as I'm sure they're impacting tribal communities across Indian country. Now, what we are experiencing now are real needs at home. Life and death brings concern. No. Real fear to our community about what is happening here in Washington, D.C. Now, there are several sectors of the public that may be applauding the slashing of federal funding because they have been convinced it is fraught with waste and abuse. There are those who now see federal employees as the new enemy, people who don't work and only seek out federal jobs to carry out a political agenda. I doubt you will hear a tribal leader argue that the federal government can't be made more efficient or that there aren't places where cuts could be made. After all, we have been dealing with the federal government longer than any other group in this country. But what I want to say is the current approach, this chainsaw approach, is not going to bring efficiencies. It's not going to find billions of dollars in savings by indiscriminately cutting employees without a thought to how that will impact services. This will not make government more efficient and effective because it is only creating a federal workforce that is paralyzed by fear. These actions are destabilizing and they bring uncertainty. Members of the committee, respectfully. What I want you to know is that these actions will have a disproportionate impact on Indian country. I've often said that the government-to-government relationship is only as strong as our federal partner. And right now, there is real concern that the federal side of this partnership has the potential, the real potential, of being dismantled. Now, at a time when I need to call on the federal government to provide public safety resources for my community, I don't know if the staffing or resources will be there, members of the committee, respectfully. At a time when our tribal health care outcomes still lag behind that of the general population, our Indian Health Service personnel are worried about whether to complete an email detailing what they worked on last week and wonder whether it will lead to their firing. Now, at a time when my community continues to work on addressing the drought on the Colorado River, employees with years of experience addressing these tribal water rights and water resources in the West don't know if they will have jobs in a month. At a time when our veterans need continued services, they wonder if the cuts at the VA will impact their ability to access benefits and get the care they need. At a time when our community built 2 new schools in partnership with this committee to improve the educational outcome of our students, our teachers and parents are worried that the BIE programs may face significant cuts. This is not anecdotal. This is real. This is happening right now. Again, there are reforms that can and should be made, members of the committee, but they must be made in a way that offers insight, consultation with tribal governments, and with dignity. And they must be made by those who have the experience and the knowledge of tribal programs. Funding and staffing decisions for Indian programs should be made by this committee, respectfully, which has the jurisdiction over these important decisions. Now, members of the committee, Chairman Zinke, I have personally heard all of you educate others about the sacred trust responsibility toward tribes. You make sure new members to the committee understand that the political relationship with tribal governments is one that cannot be negotiated away. I know that the funding gains we make are hard fought, and I know that some years when major cuts happen elsewhere, that you work to minimize the impact on Indian country. And I will wrap up to say that it is up to this committee to make those decisions within this jurisdiction and authority and provide my people with the certainty that they deserve, the certainty that the essential programs that they rely on won't simply be cut by 50% without due consideration by this committee, certainty that our tribal sovereignty will be upheld and honored. And as I mentioned at the outset, I must leave right away to get back to my community to address a public safety crisis that has arisen. I should have left last night, but I felt it was critical that I speak to all of you about these concerns. On behalf of my community and our members, thank you for allowing me this time today.
Mr. Chair, can I just, you go ahead if you want.
No, go ahead.
I just want to thank you for staying. I'm so sorry about the crisis you have to go home to face, and my sympathy to everyone in your community. But also thank you for your thoughtful remarks and for taking the time to talk to us about our important responsibility.
I'll echo that, and I wish you safe travels, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you, let's see, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Clark?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Chairman Clark of the Wallapai Tribe. Mr. Zinke, I would like to first thank you for what you've done for the water rights. I know you've done much for Montana, and once a year I do travel to Montana to visit. So,
I'll talk about it.
good to be here. Like I said, my name is Chairman Clark, representing the Wallapai Tribe and the Wallapai people. I know many are joining us right now and viewing this. And I am here to talk about the Water Rights Settlement Act of 2022. I'd like to thank each of the committee members that are here and what you do, the importance that you do for us in Indian country. My prayers are with Governor Lewis and his community, and safe travels to Governor Lewis and all that are here. I have brought my team from the Wallapai Tribe. I'm joined here by Councilman Imus, Councilman Corta, and Councilwoman Havatone, along with my executive team as well. As I said, here to represent the Wallapai people and talk about the Settlement Act of 2022. Now, what's different about this water rights settlement, it's public law. It came from the 117th Congress, and it is Public Law 117-349. And it's been quoted as to be one of the most pristine settlements in water rights. It's an historic settlement and worked upon many decades from prior leaders and with your help as well. $312 million of the Water Rights Infrastructure Trust Fund for the development of this. Very crucial. We're going to talk about a little about fiscal year 2025 and the appropriations bill to be fully funded. This settlement is to be fully funded by April 19th, I believe, April 15th of 2029. We are definitely here in move and strong support of the funding. Now, in a worst case scenario, let's say this goes to a CR for a long term. It's very important that this is funded for the Wallapai Tribal Settlement. Why I bring that up is because the work that has been done throughout the years, throughout the decades for this historic water settlement could just evaporate in 2029 if it is not funded. Now, let me describe about the Wallapai Tribe. If you have not been to the Wallapai Tribe, I invite you to come visit us. Northwest Arizona, Wallapai Tribe. And the reason I'm going to bring this up, we are very proud that we are the second highest employer for Mojave County in Arizona. Thank you to the Grand Canyon West. Without the water settlement moving forward, we're not able to do the infrastructures and create more jobs and economics for not only the county of Mohawk County, but the state of Arizona. So with that said, there's some concerns that I do have. Many years ago, 50 years ago, and I'm aging myself as well, I'm at that age as well, 50 years ago, they put in the piping. And along the way, we've had so many concerns in our community that we've lost water. We've come up with strategic ways to address that. But it's very important. 50 years of that piping. Now, there is other concerns, small wells outside the reservation that provide for our ranchers and wildlife. This is not for human consumption. It's only potable water for the animals. And that's one of the biggest concerns that we have is with the West water. In the community, as I mentioned earlier, about the concerns of the loss of water for many days that we had, that was from the Truxton Aquifer. But the real point of being here today is asking the subcommittee, and along with the Wallapai people, asking the subcommittee to help fund this. As I stated, something different. It's public law. As I stated, it's public law 117-349. And I ask the subcommittee and pray that you will continue to do your work as you have for Indian country and in your support for the water settlement for the Wallapai tribe. I'm going to end this by saying Hankia, that's thank you, and I invite you to come visit us.
Good morning. My name is Terry Ramler, Chairman of the San Carlos Apache Tribe, located in southeast Arizona. Our reservation spans about 1.8 million acres. At the outset, we humbly request your help in ensuring that federal agencies disperse all funding to tribes as appropriated by Congress. We further request the exemption of IHS and BIA from hiring freezes and workforce reductions, given the high vacancy rates and extreme challenges filling these jobs. My testimony focuses on the following: 1, police officers; 2, dangerous roads; 3, our 1992 water settlement legislation; 4, domestic water supplies; and 5, contract support costs and the 105L program. Police officers. Our committed police personnel risk their lives daily. In FY24, we suffered over 3,600 crimes, including 3 homicides, with almost 33,000 calls for service. Our officers at the San Carlos Apache Police Department work 12-hour shifts and overtime and patrol over 360,000 miles per year. They endure extreme situations made worse by the lack of an adequate facility. The Bureau of Justice Statistics analyzed FBI data in 2020 and reported that the reservation suffered the highest rate of violent crime in Indian country. Our police department is severely underfunded and public safety is severely compromised. We need a total of 75 police officers, but only have 19 officers to cover our large reservation. Our police department cannot compete with other places that offer higher salaries and better benefits. Other jurisdictions actively recruit away our officers. We request a significant funding increase for police services in the Interior Appropriations Bill, and further request that the subcommittee work to develop allocated funding streams from the Department of Justice for tribal public safety. Roads. Our reservation has over 2,400 miles of road. There are too many roads with blind curves, no shoulders or guardrails, poor signage, and unsafe design. We log many hours driving to get to work, school, and appointments, and our tribal members need safe roads. Our bus drivers, law enforcement, and firefighters need safe roads too to do their jobs. Many people have died due to the poor road conditions. Our road backlog totals over $200 million due to chronic lack of funding. We urge you to work with other subcommittees and authorizing committees to prioritize reservation roads. We request Department of Transportation funding allocated directly to tribes to address the backlog. Our Water Rights Settlement. Congress enacted our Water Rights Settlement Act over 33 years ago for a water delivery system. This system would help us develop our economy and provide access to quality drinking water. Our current water supply contains high levels of toxic substances and is not reliable. In the summer, we have to haul in bottled water. Drought and wildfires have heightened this need. In 2023, Bureau of Reclamation finally moved forward on the feasibility study. Once this is completed, we will need funding to make this project a reality. We request full funding for this project. Drinking water. Last October, BOR awarded the tribe a domestic water supply grant under the Inflation Reduction Act for planning design for drinking water infrastructure. We have always needed this infrastructure, but there was never funding for this until the IRA. We are still waiting to draw down this funding. We humbly request your assistance in ensuring that this grant funding moves forward and that this program is protected. Contract support costs and Section 105L payments. We have a 638 contract to manage and operate our IHS hospital facility that employs over 800 people. Last year in Becerra versus San Carlos Apache Tribe, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the tribe's position that IHS must pay these costs to tribes when spending revenue collected from third-party billing. With this ruling, we request that these costs and payments be reclassified as mandatory appropriations to ensure that IHS has sufficient funding. The importance of the 105L program is underscored by our need for a public safety facility when BIA condemned our previous facility in 2009 without meeting its obligation to provide an adequate replacement. Given that BIA has failed to provide a facility, we are working to develop one through the 105L process. Ahiya, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it, Terry. Mark. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Chairman. Mike on.
Well, thank you, Chairman Simpson, Congressman Zinke, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to share our funding priorities for the fiscal year 2026 federal budget. My name is Martin Harvier, the president of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community. Our community has a long history of self-governance, compacting the majority of our federal programs from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and more recently from the Indian Health Services. Not only does this allow us to operate programs more effectively by eliminating federal red tape, but it builds capacity within our community and allows us to tailor our services to meet specific community needs. It is from this perspective that I share our recommendations to improve self-governance programming, but also note why it is important to continue funding key programs. Tribal programs are not DEI initiatives. They are a fulfillment of treaty and trust obligations and must not be subject to arbitrary reductions or freezes. Just yesterday, we found out that the BIA was directed to put together a plan to reduce its workforce by up to 40%. This is unacceptable, and we look forward to working with Congress and the administration to ensure the history and purpose for tribal programming is understood and upheld. As it relates to Indian Health Services, we would like to thank this subcommittee for its recent historic investments in Indian health system. Our community, like many tribal nations, has a long way to improve the health disparities that exist compared to those of neighboring cities and towns. For example, the average life expectancy in our community is just 52 years, compared to 85 years for the city of Scottsdale that borders our community. Our lofty goals to improve the health of our community will take the support of many components of the Indian health system. As such, these items are clearly noted in my written testimony, but are best summarized as: first, protect the IHS from cuts, recessions, sequestrations, freezes, and shutdowns. Second, work towards mandatory funding for contract support costs and Section 105L leasing payments. Third, restore critical infrastructure investments for the Indian health system. And fourth, addressing the staffing shortages through adequate funding. We can and we must do better, and that starts with continuing to prioritize funding increase for the IHS over the next several fiscal years. In the same way, the Department of Interior and Bureau of Indian Affairs provide critical support for community and economic development. Like the Indian Health Services, we believe Congress should move the 105L leasing program from the discretionary to mandatory budget. Doing so will fulfill the intent of the Indian Self-Determination Act. Second, one key issue that stifles both community and economic development is fractionated land interest. To date, we have over 1,000 active allotments within our community boundaries, with almost half being considered highly fractionated with 50 or more owners, make it nearly impossible to use the land efficiently. Thanks to the land buyback program established from the Cobell land settlement, we receive funding to consolidate some of these interests, allowing us to develop housing and infrastructure on these parcels. While this program ended in 2022, we have previously asked the committee to continue funding this important program. We asked the committee to consider restoring the funding in fiscal year 26. Lastly, I want to speak on two issues that also stifle development activity and are rooted in too much regulatory red tape from the BIA that prevent our community from managing its own land and resources. Through our existing self-governance compact, we have assumed and made efficient the administration of many programs, only to have BIA slow down the execution of important transactions. First, there are needless reviews of probate cases at many levels of the BIA that create delays from 1 to 4 months. And second, staffing shortages at the local BIA office prevent us from executing right-of-ways, real estate transactions in a timely manner, and frequently going above the 60-day statutory time frame. In my view, these are small housekeeping items, and we are happy to work with the committee to develop report language or other steps to solve these issues. In closing, our community is a firm believer that self-governance works. It could even be more successful if programs continue to be funded at appropriate levels and that excessive federal bureaucracy be eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I missed the testimony for part of it, but I was actually listening in the other room. I had a conversation I had to have. So anyway, thank you all for being here and your testimony. Do you guys have a golf course?
Yeah, we got two of them, two 18-hole golf courses.
I was going to say, pretty good golf course, because
Tucson
I'm
State.
pretty sure I played there. Do you make any money off those?
I think golfing is doing pretty well right now throughout the country. But I think all of the
And it's
tribes
funny that you
here-
mentioned golfing. You know, that is one of our dreams out at Grand Canyon West. And the water settlement that we talked about wouldn't be possible if we have that. And so that's why I wanted to talk about that today. You do have the copy of my testimony, Chairman, in the Water Settlement Trust Fund, and hoping for fiscal year 2026, the funding is up to $65 million. Part of this, as I mentioned earlier, there is a deadline on this. It goes to April 15th of 2029. But that would be a dream to have a golf course out at our area. And Chairman Simpson, come visit us.
Yeah, I would like to. Like I say, I've been down. I've played your golf course and stuff and love them. And the Shoshone-Bannock tribe in Idaho Falls, we've talked. I mean, in Idaho, we've talked about a golf course out there, and I know they've considered that and stuff. Our golfing season isn't quite as long as yours.
It's a nice
in fact,
time.
it's like below zero today.
I just wanted to comment. I know Governor Lewis testified and had to leave. He is one of, we consider sister tribes. I know Don Otham Nations here, the Akshin. I just offer condolences to the Gila River Indian community, and God bless them and what they're dealing with right now. So.
And same, I feel close to Governor Lewis, and my thoughts are with his community.
All of our thoughts are. Representative Pingree?
Yeah, thank you all, and we're all so sorry he had to leave and the challenges that he's dealing with. But thank you for your testimony and the water settlement that's come up. We were talking earlier with the New Mexico tribes, but obviously we know your area. Water settlements are really critical, and I feel confident the chair will figure out how we're going to manage the support for all these water settlements. It's clear it's only going to get more complicated, water rights and availability. So we want to do whatever we can to be helpful, and just appreciate all of the testimony you brought to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zinke.
Well, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. In my experience on water compacts are a settlement. So you have three entities. You have the sovereign nation, you have the state, and you have BIA all working together. And it was decided that rather than litigation, we would go through a compact, although it's not perfect and it's late, but we'd go through a compact settlement process. It's my opinion that it's not appropriated dollars. It's a treaty obligation. And there is a Department of Justice settlement fund that was set up partially for this. So with my colleagues, I don't think you need an offset. It's not appropriated. It should come out of the settlement fund because that's what the settlement fund was for. And there are a lot of compacts hanging out there. But without stability of water, you really can't go forward on economic development or et cetera, et cetera. So I'm an advocate. I think there's a water compact with now the northern Montana. It's really Fort Belknap water compact. It's been about 40 years, which is probably consistent with a lot of compacts out there. But we think that if along that path, both sides would agree that the settlement fund is the right way, so we don't get bogged down in trying to find offsets for treaty obligations.
Terry?
On that point, I just want to say with the Lower Colorado River Basin Fund, whatever Congress put in there, it's dwindling away as more and more tribes reach settlement. So that funding, if we want to go that route that Mr. Zinski is proposing, that funding needs to be replenished. Otherwise, we're going to have to continue to come here and ask for appropriations to supplement that funding.
And as I mentioned when we were talking about this with some other tribes earlier in the day, is these water settlements are going to eat the entire budget fairly quickly, but it's something we got to do. So, Mr. Zinke said, we're looking at the judgment fund and what the requirements would be there. We might have to change some language and a few things in it and stuff to be able to do it. But it is, unless they're going to give us a hell of a lot bigger allocation because of the water settlements, we got to find a. And what I'm trying to find is how we're going to pay these for the future, because there's a lot of them coming down, and it is water in the West is. Know that Shelley will understand this is different than it is in the East.
Right.
We have prior appropriation doctrine, and frankly, many of our river basins are over appropriated. The whole Colorado River Basin was over appropriated years ago in the 1920s when they thought a lot more water went down that river than actually does. And consequently, you're seeing the bathtub rings at Lake Powell and the other places and stuff. So I don't know that you'll ever see Lake Powell filled again, frankly.
Sir, in the West, water is sacred.
Yeah, it is. And I have always said, because I've got a lot of friends who are water attorneys and some who think they're water attorneys. Anybody that really understands water law in the West has to be about half crazy. It's the most complicated thing I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, thank you all for being here today and testifying. Appreciate it very much.
Chairman Simpson,
and
thank you.
I'll get down there and see these. I'll do a riparian tour on the golf courses.
There you go. Yeah.
Have a good day. You too. Thank you.
I'll be right back and just use the restroom, and I'll come right back.
Yeah, that's okay. Carla Johnson, Tanya Lewis. Pretty good, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
You're just trying to outshine.
Yeah. Carla, you're up first. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. Good thought. Thank you. Skugdash, Aniapjigit Carla Johnson, Vice Chairwoman of the Thanawatam Nation. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Appreciate your time today. I am Carla Johnson, as I said, Vice Chairwoman of the Thanawatam Nation in Southern Arizona, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today, as well as your commitment to providing much-needed funding for Indian country. First, I ask that you prioritize funding for our roads. There are more than 700 miles of BIA roads on our reservation, and they are in very bad shape. During the annual monsoon season, which can last for months at a time, it is common for flooding to completely wash out our roads. This flooding strands and endangers our members and prevents them from accessing essential services. These roads are also used by federal and tribal law enforcement engaged in border security and by emergency response personnel. The BIA road maintenance program has been underfunded for years and has a huge backlog. Only 13% of BIA roads nationwide are in acceptable condition. More funding must be provided for BIA roads program, for the BIA roads program in FY26. This funding is critical for the safety of tribal members, law enforcement, emergency responders, and all others using our reservation roads. Next, I will address the need for water settlement funding. And I appreciate the conversation had here just a minute ago about water. The nation was one of the first tribes to enter into a federally approved water rights settlement, and we are in negotiations to settle our remaining claims. Unfortunately, our existing water settlement has never been fully implemented because of the chronic underfunding. Discretionary funding must be made available to fund our settlement. Otherwise, the nation will never receive the compensation that it was promised. Federal funding is also needed to address our unique public safety and law enforcement challenges. The nation shares a 62-mile border with Mexico, and we work closely with Border Patrol and other law enforcement agencies to secure the border. But federal financial support is extremely limited. Every year, we spend more than $3 million of our own tribal funds, $3 million of our own tribal funds to help meet the United States border security responsibilities. The nation's police are often the first and only responders to criminal activity, but our police work out of a converted 1950s era BIA jail that is not equipped to handle modern law enforcement responsibilities. The nation's detention center is also in very poor condition. In fact, in April 2023, a report from the Interior's Office of Inspector General highlighted serious health and safety concerns at that facility, which have not yet been fully addressed. BIA estimates that the current unmet need for public safety and justice programs in Indian country is more than $3 billion. This is a real public safety crisis. Congress must provide additional funding to address this shortfall. Greater federal investment is needed for our failing Indian Health Services facility. The current IHS deferred maintenance backlog is $1 billion. The nation's 60-year-old hospital in Sal's, Arizona is one of the oldest IHS facilities, and it can only handle minor medical issues. It has been on the IHS facilities construction list for over 30 years. Congress must appropriate more funding to complete the healthcare facilities on this list in a reasonable time frame. In August 2020, the Phoenix Indian Medical Center was forced to close its labor and delivery services because of aging infrastructure and inadequate equipment. Those services still have not resumed. Congress must do better to fulfill the trust obligation to provide health care to Native Americans. Finally, more funding for Bureau of Indian Education facility construction is critical. BIE itself has identified 2 of our schools on its list of facilities in poor condition. One of those, the Santa Rosa Ranch School, was forced to close in 2018 due to significant issues. It still has not been replaced with a permanent facility. The Santa Rosa Day School, another school on our reservation, is listed first on BIE's replacement list, but unfortunately will not be fully funded until 2028. The poor conditions at BIE schools have been documented for decades. We urge you to provide adequate funding to ensure that Native children have a safe and secure learning environment. Again, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you, and we look forward to continuing working together.
Thank you, Carla. Tanya?
Dagode Hapatakahani. My name is Tanya Lewis, Chairwoman for the Yavapai Apache Nation. The needs of my nation are vast and range from social services programs, wildfire programs, healthcare programs, natural resource programs, to our roads maintenance programs. We appreciate that the new administration continues to recognize the government-to-government relationship that tribes have with the federal government and has a responsibility to be a partner in this prosperity. The best way to fulfill this responsibility is to uphold the statutory and treaty obligations that the United States has to all tribes. A critical component of this is to fully fund the programs that our nations rely on to meet the needs of our people. We recognize that America is facing difficult fiscal challenges. With the growing national debt, we ask that tribes not bear the brunt of these challenges, as we have been a foundation of America's prosperity with our land, water, and resources for generations. America must keep the promises that were made to tribes in our treaty and congressional statutes. My nation has a need for additional law enforcement officers. Right now, we are operating at 50% capacity and level of need. Right now, as a result, the officers are working 50 to 70 hours a week. More disheartening for our officers is they are being paid a fraction of what they could be paid in other law enforcement agencies. As a result, we have a high turnover rate. The most basic role of any government is to ensure that our citizens are safe. To do this, we need a strong and capable law enforcement department. We urge the committee to increase funding for this important program. We ask that the subcommittee provide additional funding for the BIA tribal detention services. In 2024, the BIA told the nation it was no longer going to fund detention services for the nation, specifically the contracts that we have with local jails to house our offenders. This was shocking to the nation. It came without warning or consultation. After we raised our concern, the BIA stated it would provide $196,000 to safely house those who are arrested and prosecuted by our tribal courts. This is far short of the $300,000 needed to properly house both adult and juvenile offenders on an annual basis. To have a functioning law enforcement program, we need a place to safely detain our offenders, and the BIA has a responsibility to fund this activity. Taking care of the most vulnerable in our community, our children, is my priority. The nation's social services program is the heart and soul of our nation. Our social services staff work with our families to keep them together. They work to ensure our members have access to appropriate counseling and other service, including job training and behavioral health services. And in cases where the children must be removed, they work to ensure our children are placed in tribal homes where they remain connected to our nation and our cultural way of life. In FY25, Congress passed a $1.5 million increase to the BIA Indian Child Welfare Program. We ask that Congress provide at least this level of funding this year. One of our greatest threats to the West is wildfire. The best way to address wildfires is prevention. A critical mission of our fire department is fuels reduction by clearing debris and downed trees from storms and floods. We can ensure that we do not have a tinderbox on our reservation. The wildfire program needs additional funding to support these efforts. Another threat to the West is the diminishing access to drinking water. This is why support for tribal water settlements is so important. The nation has a water settlement pending, and we ask that the committee's support for the tribal water settlements. Finally, funding for the Indian Health Service is critical to all of Indian country. The nation's medical centers provides healthcare services that include primary medical care, behavioral health, dental, vision, and other support services. We have a patient population of approximately 1,200. This includes 300 diabetic patients, many whom are elderly. While we provide critical primary care, given the physical limitations of our clinic, we are forced to refer out certain care, including maternal and patients with acute pain management needs. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you as chairwoman of the Yavapai Apache Nation. Ehia, Henegam.
Thank you. Thank you for both being here today and for bringing up the issues that you brought up. Some of them we've talked about with a lot of other tribes that have the same issues. Water settlements have actually come up more than I would have anticipated, but there are tribes all over the West that have water settlement issues that are going to be a challenge for us to fund, but need to be funded. So we got to find the way to do it. You mentioned law enforcement and keeping law enforcement officers on the job and not having just be the training ground for other communities and stuff that hire them once they get trained. It's not only law enforcement on the Fort Hall Reservation that I live next to. It's also firefighters and stuff. As soon as they get trained, they're gone where they get a better salary, better benefits, all that kind of stuff. Understand it. And those are important issues that we've got to work on. There's not, I don't know of how many yesterday, maybe 2 or 3 that mentioned roads, but you both mentioned roads. Talking about keeping your community safe means being able to drive on a safe highway or a safe secondary road. When we went out and visited several years ago the Navajo and Hopi reservations, they took us out to a school, and it was on a unpaved road. And both me and Congressman McCollum had on Fitbit watches. We were on a van driving out to this school, and it wasn't all that far, but it was a few miles. I got 26,000 steps just sitting on the van. That's how bad the road was, you know? And I think she beat me. I think she got like 28,000 steps. So that's the way to get your steps in every day. But anyway, it is a real issue, and I know that Chairman Cole, when he was chairman the last few years of the Transportation Committee, looked at the programs that the Transportation Department funds and made sure that we were getting Indian money into the Indian tribes for roads, where the rest of it had grown. It hadn't grown that much for Indian nations. So it's been interesting. But you're right, roads is a very important thing, and we need to pay some more attention to that. We always look at law and order, Indian education, and Indian health services as the 3 areas. But there's a lot of other areas that we've got to cover. And I think you're both right. I've been disappointed over the years, and I think all of us could say that we haven't been able to do as good a job on construction of Indian schools as we need to. I've been to some in South Dakota where literally there's no way I'd let my child go to that school because it's just not safe. But yet they have to use them because it's the only one there. And it is, and we got to change that. So.
And thank you for bringing up Indian Health Services. You know, I was sitting in the back here and I heard a very significant statistic by President Javier and the proximity of such a different age range from one location to the next location, and they are basically neighbors.
Yeah.
And how that lifespan can completely be that much of a difference.
Yeah.
It's concerning, and to me, I think that the IHS, the Indian Health Services, contributes so much to the well-being of who we are as people and our health. Obviously, we need that. But when we're talking about the funding and the underfunding and the need for new facilities and to continue the renovations and repairing of facilities and outdated equipment, things that all contribute to the health and well-being of our people.
Yeah.
But it really puts it in perspective when we talk statistics like lifespans. That was really concerning. Thank you.
52 years versus 85.
Thank you. Yes.
Isn't that
was
bizarre?
very-
That's just so weird. And it is, what you're dealing with to some degree here is, and this is not criticism of these members and stuff, because before I got on this committee and started studying Indian issues and stuff, I lived next to the Shoban tribe, worked on the reservation for years of my life, so you'd have thought I'd have known Indian issues. I really didn't until we started studying the issues when I got here and stuff. But had a member come up to me who was a physician, and this was early last year, and they were looking at the budget and stuff. Says, why the hell are we spending money on diabetes, on studying diabetes on reservations? We know what the hell causes diabetes. Why do we need to spend money on that? Well, there's more to it than that. A lot more. Yes, we know what causes diabetes, but can you tell me why Indians have the highest rate of any subpopulation in the country of diabetes of anybody? Well, no, I said, those are the kind of things we're studying. And it's fascinating that some of the most successful programs are when you're getting especially your young members, but all tribal members, back on their original foods that they used to eat instead of the processed crap we have now. So I think it's a fascinating subject, and it is a very important program in Indian country. So anyway, thank you. Ms. Pingree.
Yeah, well, I'll just concur with all the chairman's thoughts, and really thank you both for being here. And, one other, I think, striking thing that we just have to have as a reminder is when you talked about the IHS facility, which, has been on the list for 30 years, or a school that's first on the list that won't get replaced till 2028 or won't even start to get the funding. I mean, we know those numbers are out there, but then you just realize, how little funding there is to meet the demand and the need. And for so many reasons, we need to continue to do more with that. And I'm glad the chairman brought up, one of the big concerns about how do we help with the underlying causes of diabetes. And so often it's, a tribe is in a food desert. There's not adequate healthy food, or it's not financially available, or some of our programs like SNAP don't adequately serve the tribes. I put some legislation in on the appropriations side on produce prescription programs at the Indian Health Service. It's another way of making sure that we can get people more fresh fruits and vegetables when it's often unavailable or too expensive. And I don't think we focus on that enough, or availability of native foods and changing diets. So anyway, thank you all. You're obviously great leaders for your communities, and we want to support you in any way we can.
And the continuance of the special diabetes program is
Absolutely.
very important.
And
we would appreciate continued funding for that.
Yeah, we've had a couple of tribes mention that, and we really have to make sure that stays on the list. When you said of 1,200 patients, 300 were diabetic and often elderly, we just know the severe consequences and cost of the people, their families, and medical costs of treating that. We should do much more with prevention.
Right back home, we do monthly walks, health walks. We hand out literature, and also I'm very proud of our diabetes coordinator. Her name's Robin Hazelwood, and she does an excellent job where we do a healthy meal. So she provides the groceries and the menu, and we make it and we feed it, and we take photos and show what we've done in healthier ways to eat, and encouraging that in our homes.
I need to get you to come to my home for a healthier way to eat. Yeah, that's right.
And if you ever make it to Arizona, you are more than welcome to visit the Tohono Nation. We got some roads for you.
Yeah.
We would love help with our roads. Side shoulders,
Yep.
guardrails, those are luxuries to us. We really need to start taking care of our roads for the safety of our people and all motorists. We'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we need to, back to the special diabetes program, we need to do a better job of educating people, us people here in Congress and stuff and staff, about what exactly it is and what they do. And I can see why this guy came up to me and said, why are we studying diabetes? We know what the hell causes it. It is, but the program, as we talked about, is much, much more than that. And we need to do a better job of educating the rest of Congress as to why this program is so important. So anyway, Ryan, did you have anything?
No, sir.
Thank you for being here today. We appreciate it very much. I know it's a long trip out from Arizona because I make a long trip back to Idaho every now and then. But it's good to hear from you, and we certainly appreciate your input on this upcoming year's fiscal budget and what your priorities are. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. We sincerely appreciate all of you coming to testify before our subcommittee. We will reconvene at 1:30 for our second session. The committee stands adjourned.